tough measuring stick, even against yourself.
Whoa. Yeah, well, I haven't had much sleep lately. My sleep patterns have been all foobarred. But yesterday I actually went to Brooklyn for a presentation at the Avenue N Jewish Center, which is a synagogue, its name. And holy cow, it was unbelievable how arduous the trip was there and back. When you look as far as the crow flies from my house to my destination, you think, it wouldn't take long. No, 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 no. Transportation is always a challenge in the New York area. Welcome everybody to the Critical Thinking Forum. Here are the room rules. We're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. Top of the hour, I will toss out my opening salvo, which hopefully will encourage you to participate. And if you wish to, just raise your hand and come up onto the stage. You can wait until something is offered on the stage, which prompts you to want to join us up here. Or if you wish, based on the topic and anticipation, you can come up now, as has Steve, and welcome as well to Alan to the stage. Generally speaking, after people speak, they're removed from the stage to the audience. This is not punitive in nature, but only to make it possible for me to maintain the queue. I call people in the order in which I see them, which may not coincide with the order in which you see yourself on the stage. So if it appears I've skipped over you, just be patient. I always get to everybody who is on the stage. Since we are here from 5 to 6 p.m. New York time, at about 5 minutes to 6, we will no longer be inviting people onto the stage. But if at the 6 o'clock hour you are in queue, we will go into extra time to give everybody an opportunity to speak. Unlike many of the other rooms on Clubhouse, in the Critical Thinking Forum, we endeavor to speak one at a time and not to interrupt one another, and we treat each other with a degree of decorum and respect, even when we vehemently disagree. And for that, I thank you in advance. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. Welcome to the stage, Brent, with your pretty puppy on your screenshot there, your profile pic. We are less than a minute away from starting, precisely at the top of the hour. Somebody else wants up here. Synergy and Rep John. There you go. Welcome.
Yeah, it is an interesting, before we all get started, interesting piece. I just called the little brother. Apparently there are no such cuts to NOAA funding. He gave me a document to look at.
I think there are, and I will delineate that. But if you want to challenge that, feel free when it's your opportunity.
I think that's probably what I'm going to do, because he's been working on the big beautiful bill for the better part of like 2 months.
This is not the big beautiful bill. This is something that takes effect today. Okay, we're seconds away from the top of the hour. Welcome Alan to the stage as well. And John, who I think I welcomed before you got up here. We are now at the top of the hour. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. We are here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. And today's topic is the hurricane data and food bank cuts good public policy. And you may wonder why, when the food bank cuts occurred some time ago, we are talking about that along with the hurricane data cuts, which take effect today. And I will tell you why. There was a story in the New York Times this morning that caught my attention, which said that as a result of those cuts, which I believe occurred in the spring sometime, I've got that data in front of me and I'll get to it in a second. But as a result of that, the food banks here in New York City are really hurting. They're not being able to meet the demand. And so I actually posted that to the chat, which is linked above, this morning. And I asked, maybe rhetorically, I'm wondering whether this affects other cities around the nation. And so that prompted me to do a little research today And the answer is yes, it is not unique to New York. So while we have one issue that is current, the other one is current in the sense that it is continuing. So let me, and I'm glad that Marshall jumped in there in advance because maybe there's a misconception. These cuts to the hurricane data information, they are Defense Department satellite data cuts, and they have absolutely nothing to do with the big beautiful bill that is being voted on in the Senate today and was voted on earlier in the House of Representatives, which is something that we will obviously be getting into after the vote. But what the Trump administration did is they pulled the plug on the processing and distribution of microwave data, and this is a little technical, and I'm going to try to say it in non-technical terms because I don't even understand it from a technical standpoint, but from 3 satellites that are jointly operated by the Defense Department and NOAA. And the data includes these special sensor microwave imager sounder information. So basically what it does is that it peers through the clouds. So the issue is that at night, that's the only way they can really see like the eye of the storm. When the storm is well offshore, it's too far away for the hurricane hunting aircraft to fly into the center of it. And at night, otherwise you really can't see what is developing. So the whole idea is that if people are in the potential path of a hurricane, you want to give them as much reliable and advanced information as possible so that they can make the decisions with as much information as possible to be armed with on whether or not to evacuate or whatever decisions they think that they have to make. The earlier you start giving people information, which we know historically changes from hour to hour sometimes, much less day to day, but as much information as you can give them to give them an idea of what the potential strength of a storm may be is really paramount towards saving lives. So the experts are warning that there will be a degradation, I think is the proper word, of data as a result of this. Nighttime blind spots, and along with this lack of use of this data are layoffs among NOAA. So there are fewer people to analyze data today than there was yesterday, because this takes effect today. And by the way, it's not just, I didn't know this until I started researching this, the satellite information, but it's weather balloon information as well. They are reducing the number of weather balloon launches. Now, with regard to the food banks cuts, the USDA, under the president, canceled or paused more than $1 billion in funding across a number of food security initiatives. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, which sent truckloads of food to state and local warehouses, and the local food purchase and farm to school grants. Those supported school lunch, fresh produce via farmers. Those were cut as well, substantially. So, as I said early on here, what prompted this was the New York Times article, which was about the food banks in New York that are struggling. I decided to take a deeper dive into this. In Virginia, and these are just, I'm just going to list a handful of them. There are probably more, but you get the idea. In Virginia, the Blue Ridge Food area food bank lost nearly $1.5 million in funding. In New York, in Washington D.C., the capital area food bank had to cancel 670,000 meals. Nearly $3.5 million pulled from Massachusetts. Funding cut in half in the Hudson Valley of New York State. In Nevada, the Food Bank of Northern Nevada lost £1 million. This is how they're assessing it in meat and dairy. That bank serves 160,000 people, which is up 76% from before the pandemic. Houston lost 11 million. 60 fewer USDA tractor trailer loads monthly. 15% of the budget gone. More than 200 seniors no longer can get. What they're saying is 200 fewer seniors a month are who got food from that food bank are getting it now. 1 million meals lost in Delaware, and in Tampa Bay, 20 million meals lost to the food bank. So, of course, the government has a response to all of this. NOAA is pushing back at those who are raising this issue. They are claiming that discounting the ingestion of the DoD microwave data is simply part of a standard process of data rotation and replacement. And they say that other satellites are providing microwave sensing. The experts say no. The reporting on the experts say no, but this is the government's position, and as is notable about the Trump administration, when there's a conflict such as that, it's the fault of the media. So NOAA is accusing the media of sensationalizing the issue and fueling unnecessary panic. As far as USDA programs, the USDA, I went to their website, they're describing the process as a rigorous line-by-line review. It's designed to remove spending that, according to their website, is, quote, contrary to the needs of ordinary working Americans, and programs that are tied to, quote, radical gender and climate ideologies. I frankly don't understand what that means, but the programs that were pulled, according to Ag Secretary Rollins, quote, no longer effectuate the goals of the agency. Okay, so, when we elect whoever it is the president, it doesn't matter who the president is, we expect that the president will have an administration, and that administration will effectuate programs that are necessary and designed for the benefit of society as a whole. So I guess there is a philosophical question here over whether the two programs to which we are referring today are truly beneficial to society as a whole. Is it costly to grab that data from the DoD satellites that are still up there generating the data and use it for hurricane weather predictions? Maybe it's too costly to be able to grab and analyze that data. And it's to the benefit, if this is good public policy to pull the plug on that. I don't know. Nobody's saying that the satellites are dysfunctional now. So the data is still being generated. But maybe there's something there that I'm not seeing because I'm influenced by the news media that is sensationalizing this issue. I will just say, in fairness to my brethren, every story that I've seen on this is not quote, the news media, close quote, sensationalizing. It's the experts that they are interviewing, meteorologists, former NOAA employees, I guess, who are sensationalizing this. In fairness, if it is an exaggeration of the threat, blame the people who are being interviewed. And there are a number of experts, or in the case of those who disagree, so-called experts, who are saying that this could very potentially cost lives. Okay, the food bank, when you cut money to food banks, is it because the food banks are distributing food to people who are not eligible? And by cutting the money to those food banks, which are still struggling to stay in operation, have you changed the policies of the food banks? I'm reading the administration's explanation of both of these cuts. You heard them. You heard exactly what I've read. Frankly, I can't wrap my mind around the explanation. Maybe some of you can, and can expand on it in a way that makes sense of all this to people like me and others who are, quote, sensationalizing, close quote, the issue. So with that, we'll call people in the order in which we see them. And today that order begins with Marshall. Marshall? Marshall.
I am right here.
All right, come on.
Go, Marshall. Yo. So I think what we're talking about is the proposed budget bill, not the big deal.
No, we are not.
Now,
We are not. These are cuts with regard to the food banks that took place in the spring, and the data flow was cut off as of today from the satellites. Nothing to do with the big, beautiful.
it's just to do with the Trump administration through OMB clawing back money.
I don't know whether it's through OMB. I don't know the process in which
But
this
it would,
occurred.
it would be through the Office of
Okay, but whatever, the clawing back money is accurate, I guess. I don't know whether money is clawed back with regard to the satellites, because they're still up there generating the data. Although they did lay off some people at NOAA, so presumably those were the people who were analyzing the data. Maybe we didn't need them, nor the data that they were analyzing. I can't imagine that that's a major cut to the budget. But anyway, yes.
I will tell you, having a younger brother who redid the NOAA NASA reauth in 2018, reauthorization, he's not worried about it at all. Not even a little bit. And the only conclusion I can draw from that, since he's been on the Hill for 10 years, is that they're not making cuts in places that are like detrimental to NOAA's functioning. I would not only does have the power granted by Congress to claw back monies, they are not allowed to not distribute them. So they have to redistribute them at some point per the authorization language. But the Office of Management and Budget does have the ability to slow roll or claw back money.
And the premise of the questions asked are not whether they are authorized to do this. The question is whether this is good public policy to do.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, look, I'm gonna go with my little brother on this one. He's not worried about it, so I'm not gonna be worried about it. I only say that because he's somebody who is intimately aware of the functioning of NOAA and NASA, since that was what he did for a whole year and a half of his life. So I'm gonna lean more on the side of no, this is not as detrimental as we might think it is.
So how do you reconcile his analysis with that of the plethora of meteorologists and other experts who have come forward and said that this is potentially life-threatening?
I am unsure how to pair together. I can only tell you what I know about him, and which is he did the reauthorization. He's intimately familiar with the code for NASA and NOAA. And so the only thing I can figure from talking to him is he doesn't think that the cuts made during the spring are going to slow down critical functions, and that puts him at odds with those meteorologists.
Wait a minute, maybe we're talking about two different things, because if he is analyzing cuts that occurred in the spring, and we're talking about cuts that occurred today, is it possible that to which you're referring and to which I am referring are two different things, or?
It's possible. I'll grant you that, this is a little confusing for me. It being cuts and clawback money, not bills. So it could be I was more trying to use your timeline than anything else, but his analysis does put him at odds with those meteorologists.
Yeah, I think there were cuts to NOAA that we've actually discussed before, and I think maybe the confusion is that you're referring to that because this is something that is happening today.
Gary, I think that's what it is. Thank you for correcting the confusion.
Well, if you had brought it up, other people who might be confused wouldn't know either. What about the food banks?
I mean, I don't think cutting food bank money is good policy. Granted, townships and states are supposed to take care of their own folks, but where the township can't keep up, in particular in places like New York City or, say, like Houston or Dallas in Texas, those folks probably need federal funding. So that, I would argue, is not a good policy. But I will admit to being more confused about the NOAA and NASA than I think I actually have firmness on. But no, cutting food banks does not seem like a good policy to me.
I would hope that somebody might, somewhere along the line, give an explanation of why they're doing these things. But at any rate, thank you, Marshall.
Hey everybody, it's nice to see everybody. Did somebody kick John from the stage, by the way? I don't know if somebody did that, but
I doubt it. I don't think anybody gets kicked from the stage.
I got him a back channel that he was curious maybe.
Have him put his hand back up and we'll invite him back.
I think he got, I don't know. I think he got kicked from the room or something. I don't know. All right, well, that's not neither here nor there. Gary, I plead on the satellite data. I mean, to some degree, I'm woefully ignorant, right? I have to trust experts, and so I'm way out of my depth. But in general, I mean, I think there are certain things the federal government does that it does because states can't do them, right? We're probably better off with a federal tracking system for things that keep track of weather patterns rather than 50 state system. I mean, obviously. So, I mean, this is alarming if the experts that are complaining are right. I mean, that seems that we're endangering people, and I think in general, call me radical, but I think that's not great policy to give people less lead-in time for severe weather patterns and things like that. I mean, that just sounds really bad. But again, I mean, the government has answers for that, and I don't have enough information litigated out, but I mean, it sounds like something for concern. With regard to food banks, I mean, I think on some level I can see more of a philosophical argument for that, right? I think, look, the conservative argument tends to be, as Marshall said, right, that local folks should take care of their own, and that the further you get up the food chain, the worse things get. And that, I've heard conservatives say a lot of stuff like this too ought to just be done by churches, right? By religious nonprofits and things like this, by private sector charities and things like that. No, regarding churches, the average congregation is about 87 members and is not very fiscally, they're not rolling in dough to do all this stuff, right? So, I mean, and then states, right, are often have unequal sort of budgets. In fact, I mean, I was just reading something from Time there was, and this is, not the first article like this I've seen where the data is basically largely the blue states subsidize the red states, right? So, I mean, the blue states tend to pay much more into the federal government than they get back. And so it's just interesting, right? The conservatives, the red states who often are saying, hey, government's not a great thing, government is, big government's a big problem, are happy taking subsidies that come from these godless, liberal blue states. So, I think that philosophically, though, I mean, you could argue that the federal government shouldn't be providing food for people, right? And that this is just something that the federal government shouldn't do. I mean, you could make an argument, I suppose, if you're a small government conservative, that this was nowhere in the vision of the founders, or that we'd have a federal government that was doing food distribution. I would argue that times change, and sometimes we're 50 states, and sometimes we're one big collective agent, and sometimes we need the collective agent to actually come to the aid of folks in the various localities and particularities that need basic things like food. So, I'm with Marshall. I think in general, pragmatically, I just think it's a bad idea to cut food banks. I think it's very good money. It's not very practical, right? You're actually delivering something that people need tangibly, and I think it's a good thing.
Thank you, Scott. I wanted to hold my own feet to the fire a little bit because I said there have been a plethora of experts who have spoken out about the hurricane forecasting and from several AP articles. I want to source 3 quotes very quickly. This is all AC. These are all Associated Press interviews. Mark Alessi, who is a science fellow at the Union of Concerned Scientists, quoted by the Associated Press: "If a hurricane is a day away from making landfall, it's nighttime. We will no longer be able to say this storm is definitely undergoing rapid intensification." Mike Lowry, hurricane specialist. Other microwave data will be available, but only roughly half as much, which will severely impede and degrade hurricane forecasts affecting tens of millions of Americans. And the third example is Brian McNulty, quoted by the Associated Press. He's University of Miami hurricane researcher. Microwave data are already I don't know why I can't read today. Microwave data are already relatively sparse, but to abruptly end 3 active functioning satellites is insanity. That may be sensationalism, but in fairness, it's sensationalism promulgated by the experts. Why they always accuse the news media for doing its job when the news media reports things people don't want reported is something in all these years as being a reporter, I've never understood. Steve?
Yeah, Gary, let me go to the food bank thing first. As a general principle, I think that you're always going to have a segment of society that's going to be in need. I think you need to have some kind of way to take the edge off that if someone gets in a situation that they just can't feed themselves. But now I'll preface that with this caveat. You can overload a system like that without controlling your borders. Like we've seen Marshall's state being completely overrun. That type of blow into the country can add a strain to those type of systems that it's never intended to withstand. So I think it's got to be two-pronged. You take care of the people that's in need. You do what you can to facilitate and make sure no one in this country is starving. But then again, you have to have some kind of flow on the control of the flow on the demand side of this. You can't inject a large demand with a budget that wasn't intended to do that. To the satellite thing, it's my understanding that, like you referenced that one article, when it gets within a day of the shore, that by that time ground-based radar can start picking up the
and the hurricane hunters can fly.
Right, so you're not blind. I think that's a little hyperbole.
But when they're too far offshore, they can't
But that's
fly.
not a day, Gary. That's not a day out, like the guy was trying to say. If you're one day out off the coast, ground-based radar and hurricane hunters can reach that. You're talking more deep in the ocean. And, as someone that lived in a state in proximity to the coast for a number of years and went through quite a few hurricanes, let me tell you, as someone that's been through numerous hurricanes, I don't care if it's 120 mile an hour, 140 mile an hour wind. I'm going to get myself prepared. So, are we talking about the exact number on how many millibars of pressure drop we got? Or are we talking about wind speed? But for someone that's actually lived in a place that was prone to hurricanes, listen, I don't care if it's a Cat 2, Cat 3, and we had one come in on us that was Cat 4. If you live in that area, you don't have to do it. It's not going to change your preparation for someone to say, oh my God, you got a Cat 4 instead of a Cat 3. I mean, you're going to be doing the same things because the effects, even though there's going to be varying degrees of intensity, the preparation and effects are going to be very similar. So I think we may be talking about a nuance here, and maybe if you want to be able to get the exact millibar drop, or you want to get the eyewall strength or the intensity, those things that could be at play. But people who live in those areas, when they see that stuff coming in on it, if you've lived there any time at all, you know what you got to do. So I'll leave it there.
By the way, you might have missed this when I read it. So he didn't say a day away. He said a day away from making landfall, and it's nighttime. So,
I don't think nighttime would affect ground-based radar, would it?
It's not the ground-based radar that they use primarily. It's the hurricane hunters who cannot fly into the eye of the storm in the nighttime.
But it's my understanding when you get in that, if you're a day away and you say you got a storm, I think ground-based radar a day away could reach in and give you sufficient data to tell you whether you got a Cat 3 or a Cat 4. But again, if anyone's ever lived where you get a lot of hurricanes, and we're like 70 miles off the coast, so we got a little cushion from the land, but we got plenty of them. Regardless whether it's Cat 3 or Cat 4, you're going to be preparing the same.
The best example that I know, and I live at the coast, and I also have probably lived through, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes, because I was one of those idiots who got sent into the path of the hurricane to report on them as a national correspondent. So I was there before the hurricane arrived. I was on the radio telling people they should be evacuating. I was, I never had a problem finding a place to stay because everybody else was leaving. I managed to get through, obviously, all of them okay. But if you look at Katrina, which I covered, that was a massive freaking hurricane. Massive. And we know the amount of damage that Katrina created. And we knew it was a massive hurricane long before it arrived. Like, at least a week, maybe more. And it gave everybody the opportunity, whether they availed themselves of the opportunity or not, because we know that FEMA ended up dropping the ball, to not only evacuate if they had the ability to do so, which folks that didn't have the ability to do so, the local government didn't provide them that ability. They could have. But the point was, they were given advance warning long before the hurricane made landfall, and they could have, should have, would have taken the proper precautions. And I'm not just talking about individuals. I'm talking about utilities. I'm talking about people who could help with evacuation, about pre-positioning emergency response after the hurricane arrives. They knew how many, they should have known. They dropped the ball, but because of that,
Our family are not food insecure. And Womack, he put an excellent point in the chat. Like, I may not drive a lot, but you may need to drive a lot. I'm paying taxes for the roads that
state and federal dropped the ball on that. The various, mainly church-based, but not all church-based, the Red Cross was in there as well, for example. But all of these disaster relief programs in advance for Katrina, seeing the Baptists roll in, the Salvation Army roll in, the Red Cross roll in, and I'm thinking, where the hell is FEMA? Where the hell is FEMA? But the point is, Steve, they all had that advance information, so they knew to gear up. People knew to give their bosses notice. Hey, I got to take time off to go down there and volunteer on this hurricane that's coming in. It's mad, and everybody looked at the TV and they saw that it was huge. I think the ability to pre-warn with that kind of specificity, based on the interviews that I have heard with the meteorologists, is going to be diminished tremendously. And what are we saving by not analyzing the data? What's the gain by doing that, Steve?
Well, I'll just say this in relation to what you was talking about there. One of the things I was always acutely aware of during hurricane season in the area that I lived in, because there's some flooding areas, was the topography around me. I mean, knowing that they're sitting there below sea level, knowing that you got a Cat 4, I think it was Cat 4 coming in on you, people like that didn't evacuate, I don't know what to tell them, because that's just crazy land. And if you're in that type of situation, and like I say, topography is important because you get massive amounts of rain off of hurricanes. If you don't have some acumen into what your topography is and have some awareness of that as an individual, shame on you, because you're not doing your job as someone trying to look out for your family, and you should take precautions. I didn't need. We had I forget which one it was. I think it was in 87, 88. I can't remember. There's so many came in when I lived in southern North Carolina. I lose track of them. But, when you'd see these things, you'd start thinking, okay, where am I at? What's the chance of flooding? What do I need? What do I need to have a plan? I didn't rely on the government, Gary. I mean, I know they can be some assistance, but I think if you're not in trouble.
There's a really good joke Ronald White tells about hurricanes. He's a comedian. And it goes about people staying behind during hurricanes. And he goes, there's this guy on South Beach who said that he did 1,000 sit-ups so he was prepared for the hurricane. Well, brother, it's not that the wind is a-blowing, it's what the wind is a-blowing. And if you get hit by a Volvo in your spleen, it doesn't matter how many sit-ups you did that day. I hope that adds a little levity. I think the joke is very funny.
So,
Yeah,
so here's the thing about here's the thing about New Orleans. It was actually a Category 5 over the Gulf of Mexico. It was a
Yeah, I
category,
can't remember which one it was.
yeah, but it was a Category 3 when it made landfall. And this was a water event more than it was a wind event. It was the flooding that caused the most death and destruction.
Yeah, but
Ninth
Gary,
Ward, in the ninth ward of New Orleans, which was the hardest hit ward, it's in the ninth ward. Point being, the people I spent time on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. People on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, by and large, although there are poor folks there too, had in New Orleans that did not have the means to get out of Dodge. They didn't have transportation. They didn't have money to purchase transportation. School buses,
No, I was thinking of the exact same thing, Gary.
and they were flooded out. The school buses were flooded out because, well, nobody thought to evacuate the damn school bus. You could have taken those school buses and used those school buses to evacuate people to higher ground and save the school buses. Two wins with one shot. But they didn't.
But you know something, Gary? You know who primarily was responsible for the safety of their citizens there? It was the governor and the mayor.
I said the local
The
state.
governor
I
and the
said
mayor.
the local, state, and federal level. I said all three failed. But
But it
I was
primarily,
there, and I was there, and I know where the failings were, and I know on all three levels there was failure, and I know on all three levels they were pointing at the other two. I was there, I covered it, I remember all that. But the point is not how Katrina was responded to by government. The point was they had the information in hand that they should have responded in a better way than they did. Whether it's the fault of the governor or the mayor or Michael Brown who headed FEMA, it doesn't really matter. They all dropped the ball. They all dropped the ball. But
you know, Gary. Now,
but the next time we have a Katrina, and if the degree of the data is such that they cannot predict with the kind of accuracy they did the intensity of the storm, well, we won't be able to blame them for not doing their job because they didn't have the information at hand. So it's great for them. It's great for them. They don't have to do their.
No, I'd say this. I'd say that conventional radar could give you an indication of how severe something's going to be as far as the rain, wind speed. I think you're talking about very minute details within the forecasting, and the bigger picture of what's coming at you. You know, if you get a Cat 3 or you get a Cat 4 and you know you're going to get a lot of rain off this thing, you always do off hurricanes, and you know you're in a low line. I mean, you don't need precision there. You just need a little common sense. Hey, it's time to get out of a place that's going to turn into a pond and call it good. But I'll leave it there.
Steve,
All right, so just a few comments. One, Marshall, I love hearing about your brother, but
Probably shouldn't reference it so much.
no, it's fine. I'm just saying, like, I think you might be overreading, how much to kind of buy into what a congressional staffer thinks. Because I understand it's your brother, but congressional staffers, and as somebody who's dealt with some congressional staffers, they typically have huge portfolios, and they don't really understand the workings of the executives. I mean, they're typically kids out of college with no campaign staff, whatever. So I would just kind of state that
Yeah, not put
just to kind of think about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Essentially came to is they kind of looked at all the grants and studies they were cutting at universities, and they figured out that they're kind of doing a control find and looking for words that they don't like. Diversity. They cut a bunch of grants out of a pool of money where the researcher was, just or whatever in studying, whatever. It's haphazard. They cut science. It's very bad. My thesis on this hurricane data is essentially the same thing. There's somewhere where the satellite's going to kind of collect climate data, it's going to track it over time, and that's super bad for this administration. And that's why when Marshall was talking, actually OMB cutting the rug. It is terrible public policy, and this is why. Steve data, and you don't need all this nuance and all this stuff to save lives. Nationality, you do. If you go back to the 1900 Great Galveston hurricane, it killed around 12,000 people. Why did it kill around 12,000 people? Because nobody knew what was coming, and it just hit them out of the blue. We have made great strides in hurricane prediction, and it actually does matter a hell of a lot how accurate those paths are, because as somebody who has also lived in a hurricane area, you kind of get fatigued from evacuating, and people stop evacuating. Every time a hurricane comes up, you tell them the world's going to end, it's going to hit you directly. The more accurate these paths are, the more data you can share with people exactly who's in danger and exactly who should evacuate. And as far as a life saving measure, we don't know the bounty that the modern world has given, because we are in a world in which we have it so good, but we're tearing down. We're essentially tearing down what has given us that life-saving data, and it's a shame. And all because, and my thesis would be, they're I think it's short-sighted, and I think it's gone down.
By the way, nobody is, as far as I can tell, has argued that or publicly estimated how much the government expects to save by shutting off the processing of the not just the microwave sensors that are no longer going to be analyzed, but overall. I'm looking at a news article that cites a 2024 American Meteorological Society study that estimates that for every $1 invested in NOAA forecasts, $73 are saved. I see another analysis here that says that advancements in predicting wind speeds, which rely on data that includes microwave observations, not exclusively, have generated about $5 billion in savings per hurricane. Now, I'm just reading the top of this analysis. I'm not going to get into the details of it because it's just, I don't have time to read it. You don't want to hear me read it. But just suffice to say, there are great savings to be made to insurance payoffs potentially, to lives potentially. I don't see a justification for doing this. I don't see how we're saving any money by doing this.
Well, just to add to that, this sort of science subsidized is the sort of lifestyle people have come to expect on the coast. This alone was you can have the build-up areas in Florida and don't, have a Galveston, Texas every few years. And to just kind of rip it down and say the nuances don't matter. It doesn't matter that the meteorologist can tell you if a storm's going to hit Tampa or going to hit the Panhandle. That stuff matters a great deal in getting people out of danger. The accuracy of those tracks, the accuracy of those wind speeds, help cities like Tampa know when to evacuate and how to evacuate and how much to evacuate. And it's just the height of stupidity to just tear this down because of a big boogeyman that I suspect is climate change.
Well, that may or may not be the motivation for it. That's an interesting proposition. Thank you, Brent. Alan, you're up.
Good. How are you this evening, Gary?
I'm good. Sorry I didn't give you a heads up. Noticing, so.
I'm going to answer your question, then I have two small points of order, if you will indulge me. First of all, the answer on the weather thing is absolutely terrible public policy. I can't agree with Steve. I think if the government doesn't do it, who else is going to do it? There is no excuse. It's just plain dumb. And it may well be about global warming, but whether it is or isn't, I'm with you. I see no justification. Now, I'm in California. We have earthquakes. If we were talking about predicting earthquakes, I could imagine an argument that says we don't currently have that facility. Why should we invest in it? But since this is already here, why are we taking it away? It makes absolutely no sense. Now, so I disagree with Steve on that one, but I am going to agree with Steve. And some who think of me as a progressive may be surprised, but I actually think there is a justification to the food bank reduction, and Scott covered it a little bit. We want to talk about what good people we are, and Biden used to say we are great because we're good. Well, Anson often says, and I think with great justification, that government can only do what people are willing to pay for it to do. These people on the right, particularly religious people, want to be all gung-ho about abortion in terms of food, and we are going to leave this to the religious communities and see if we really are good. Let's throw that challenge open, and to some extent, I really blame George W. for this problem, because his idea of compassionate conservatism was really taking a charter away from something that had been typically in religious communities. Now, I do want to mention that my brain trust this evening at 7 p.m. Eastern is going to talk about the Great Divide. We are recording this room, Gary, and I would love to know from you why, Scott had a terrific thing on St. Augustine the other day, and I was frustrated that I couldn't go back and listen to it. Why have you chosen not to record your
Well, it's for personal reasons that I don't really want to get into right now, but
okay.
I'll tell you on a phone call if you're really.
I'd love to know, and yes, I would love to. So yes, let's do that sometime.
It's interesting when you said this. You made this comment about the philosophy of the government ought not to do it, but the churches will do it. But the churches apparently don't step up enough. Some of them do, but not enough, and they can't do it on their own, apparently. And the food banks are like the churches, I guess, right? Anecdotally, it means nothing, but let me just give you an example of a fellow I know who absolutely believed exactly what you articulated. This is not the job of government. This is the job of the churches. That's how it used to be before, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that's how it should be today. This is stupid. I don't want my tax dollars being used to help people who are too lazy to go out and get a job. That was his philosophy. I'm not saying it's yours. I'm saying that was his. That was all well and good until the guy who ran his own little business, and he became ill and he fell onto hard times and no longer could provide for himself. Guess where he went to for help? He's in subsidized housing.
Yep.
and they deliver him his food. He's all of the things that he railed against when he was making money, and by the way, he was making a lot of money at one time. There was an overhead to his business, so a lot that went in went back out, but he was bringing in a lot of revenue at one time. And then things went sour in his business, and then his health got bad. And it wasn't for lack of fortitude on his part. It was not for a lack of him not having those strong Protestant Christian values of rolling up your sleeves and working tilling the fields from dawn to dusk. He was of that ilk, and he had such strong disdain. I remember pulling up to a food cart with him. I was in his car. And he says, "Hey, there's this great food cart." Yeah. So he pulled up, and there was a guy outside the food cart begging for money. And he looked at me and says, "Get a job, Pops." Well, guess what? He's now that guy. So you got to have a safety net, I think, because not everybody's going to be able to get out of Dodge when the hurricane comes, or be able to grow food in their backyard if they even have a backyard, and and then can it and save it for the winter and all that kind of stuff. We're not that kind of a society any longer, and people don't have those skills,
But Gary, I want to push back on that for a second. This food and medicine are different than education. Education is about the future. It's about how our children are going to have a society tomorrow. But medicine and food, when do you stop? When do you say there's enough quality? And there's this conflation between what is individual responsibility and what is government responsibility. And so I'm not necessarily believing exactly what I'm saying. I'm not this cruel, but I'm saying if Anson is right, that it's more important to have guns than butter. Let's just put it that way for a brief thing. Maybe the thing that Donald Trump has done for us is forced us not to take such things for granted, and maybe people need to, in the short run, experience a little bit of seeing people starving and so forth before they recognize the great things we have.
Wow, interesting. And by the way, we're at 5:55, so we won't add anybody to the stage, but everybody on the stage will get an opportunity to speak.
Hey Gary, happy Monday. I don't have a lot to add. I did want to maybe just say I did put some information in the chat on food banks, and specifically the largest food bank network in the United States. It's called Feeding America. I put some information in there. It has raised about $4.9 billion. Has a 4-star charity rating for 10 years in a row. On its board of directors are, I think, the vice chairman of Walmart, vice chairman of Morgan Stanley, Fortune 100 type people, all supporting food safety here in the United States. Feeding America takes $0 from the federal government. It's 100% privately funded. And it does partner with SNAP and other USDA or programs. So I just wanted to put a word out there in support of the kind of work that is being done, Gary. Long Island, where I live, has a food bank established in 1980 by former singer Harry Chapin. I don't know if you remember.
first.
Okay, so Harry started the food bank, and I have been lucky enough to have founded a food pantry, which is aligned with the food bank. They provide us with distributed food. All of these organizations are privately funded.
All the
And-
ones to which you refer.
To which I refer, and I know of, which includes other communities on Long Island and whatnot, food pantries, run by, in my case, local citizens who volunteer, sit on a board of directors, that hand out bags of food on every Tuesday afternoon. They don't do that kind of work. They don't do that kind of community work. So I just want to put a word out there for those guys who do that kind of work all across the country, who are privately funded and have been doing so, well, let's say 1980. Yeah, well, that would be like 45 years. A long time. So there's a lot of work that's being done. The government, USDA and SNAP programs that the federal government funds. But this other work is equally important, and I wanted to make a point of it.
Thank you, Dominic. So when I was in Detroit, I participated as a grunt in the Meals on Wheels program, delivering food to shut-in seniors in Detroit. And I never thought about who funded it. So as you were talking, I looked it up. So that particular program receives about 35% of its funding from the Federal Older Americans Act Nutrition Program that's administered through the state. But it goes from the federal government to the state and then down to the Meals on Wheels program, and then the meals get loaded up into my car and I deliver it to the old folks' homes when I was there. So I have no idea whether the spring, I've not been in touch with those folks in decades. I don't even know who those folks are now running these programs today. But it would be instructive to me to find out whether their ability to service the senior community in Detroit has been diminished by the spring cut. I mean, this is the thing, it's always the damnation is in the details. So now we're getting into the nitty gritty of things. And
I would just make the quick point.
I would just to complete my point first, Dominic, I would be very upset based on my personal biased history because of my alliance with that program if I heard that, of course, those folks that I was delivering meals to are no longer around. But very upset if I learned that the Detroit Meals on Wheels program, to which I was a part, was no longer able to feed as many senior citizens as it did then. I can't see how anybody could say that those people could fend for themselves, nor that we should turn our backs on them. But go ahead,
I
Don.
was just going to make this distinction between prepared meals, which is what you were talking
Yes.
about, which is completely distinct from food banks and food pantries. So
You're talking about Meals on Wheels, right?
the devil's in the details. You know,
Dominic's on I am, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was tracking.
You're welcome. I'm going to check further to see whether the program that funds Detroit, the Older Americans Act nutrition program, was cut too. So, like I said, we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Agent, you're...
Sorry about that. How are you, Gary? It's good to be here.
Well, now that I'm able to put a complete sentence together without stumbling, I'm doing fine. A little earlier, not so good.
It's good to be with you. I'm not an expert on these cuts that are happening, but I'll tell you my insight. The food bank thing, I don't know enough about it. I volunteered at some food banks. I'm not quite sure how important the federal funding for food, I mean, that seems pretty high level. And, you know, I know they talk about food deserts and so forth I think there's a big problem with the nutrition, and I know Robert Kennedy's trying to address, you know, us not poisoning ourselves with sugar and chemicals and hormones and all kinds of things, but, you know, I don't have, no one's dying for lack of calories at the moment in the United States. But on this hurricane data thing is interesting. I saw a headline the other day about AI being used to do weather prediction now. And this is, I think, being pioneered by some of the big tech companies. And if we're talking about cuts to federal funding for infrastructure or analyses or personnel or so forth to do with weather, data gathering and analysis, I have to wonder for a second. It's like, how many satellites in near Earth orbit, maybe, or it's at least in the thousands that, for instance, just SpaceX has in orbit. Amazon has a new program, they almost hired me, for putting the same types of satellites in orbit. Lots of other companies are running satellites. So my point is, I think early days, when the cost of capital and the cost of the profit, and when there's a clear public good argument for some programs, it makes sense for the federal government to be, you know, the provider, to make these like tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in investment to get a new technology off the ground, and to provide that public good to everyone. But I think once the cost gets low enough that it almost just falls out. I mean, in a sense, weather data is almost just an artifact they're already gathering, and all you have to do is connect that data, which a lot of the big tech companies are doing on their own anyway, because they have profit motive to know about, you know, for their own machinations, to be able to predict the future, to be able to predict the weather, and therefore to maximize their own profits. My point is, I think we're well past the era that we need to rely on the federal government to gather and analyze this data, and actually private players are doing it in a much more sophisticated way already, and in many cases just giving it away to us for free. It's like nothing for them. And so, like, the path of the hurricane, I mean, we're not in the 1940s anymore. We're in the 2020s. And we have the technology that's practically ubiquitous is so much more powerful. And I, therefore, am skeptical of bureaucracies that may have been created in the 1940s to solve these types of problems, and whether or not they're actually providing the maximum value to the taxpayer in 2025. And certainly in 2030, I'll be very surprised if we still need them for this specific thing. There are other things you can make arguments for, but I'm not too worried that I won't know what the hurricane's going to hit or something like this. I think we've got that solved in a much more sophisticated way than we ever did.
Again, I question that why are all these meteorologists and scientists arguing otherwise? But the answer to your question is 19,000.
Do they have a financial incentive to say that?
What would the financial incentive be?
If they're a meteorologist who's getting, one way or another, getting federal money.
Like that, and don't get me wrong, because as I said, my younger brother's not too concerned about that, at least from his vantage point. But NOAA does serve an important purpose, and having to get it from a private source means, number one, they don't have the exact same resources at their disposal. But number two, it's going to have a subscription fee. NOAA has no subscription fee, and keeping NOAA as the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service is good for us. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't, Jackson, not right now. I'm not saying you can't make cuts in government programs. I am saying I don't think the idea is a very good idea. The private sector is not going to share that stuff unless they're weather data for the military that doesn't have anything to do with profit motive. Granted, they have their own weather service, but they do use NOAA as one to take off of. So, while I understand where you're coming from, the Department of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service does do a value.
Space junk, but 19,000. I don't know. At a certain point, that's a problem as well. They have to, when they do space launches, I think they have to take all that into consideration now. David.
You should Google the word Kessler syndrome.
Okay. Okay. I will. I'm interested in that. David.
Yeah, great discussion. I think the title is another title that really doesn't really need to be answered in a way that I think it's obvious that this isn't good policy, considering the level of the impact on lives, property, the ability of the American people to respond, making decisions based upon how soon do we evacuate, how much damage is going to happen. I think there's a whole host of things that the government provides that can be monetized on behalf of the taxpayer, and just basic good safety policy. We talked in the room about the FAA, the air traffic controllers. I mean, it's just good policy to have seasoned, experienced people manning the ship, manning the air flights, without any downtime, without any question, without any private seasoned professionals in government. Well, there's one religion that I know of that's done a phenomenal job of backstopping these kinds of things, and that's the lab. They have a massive network of bishop storehouses, farm to table, farm to warehouse. They've got reserves when deployed, hundreds of volunteers and food and whatnot to the sites faster than I think FEMA was providing it at the time. If we recall the confusion and all the stuff that was happening there with regard to delivery, and we had George W. telling Brown he was doing a great job when he really wasn't. The Mormons learned from the Great Depression, and they've also learned from a history of being outcasted by the United States government, which forced them in the state of Utah. But they also teach a level of self-reliance, the bishop storehouses, which is what they're called. When people go there for food, they put a program in place to get people back to work. They figure out what the budgets are. If there's elderly involved, they make sure they're fed. But this is an organization, Gary, that doesn't want to leave anything to chance, whereby they're at the beck and call of the United States government to serve their members' needs and their members' families' needs. So, again, I'm not doing a plug for them, and I'm not trying to promote their religion at all, but they have been exemplary in their history of how they see the most beneficial aspects of taking care of their congregation. And of course, if all hell in a handbasket breaks loose, the other thing they used to teach was that every member should have a year's supply of storage in their houses and their basements to be ready for any situation that could happen where you may not be able to feed your family. So I think there's a level of self-reliance there that I think the nation can learn from. But that being said, there's still a massive amount of poverty in this country, housing insecurity, food insecurity. It breaks my heart to see our government debate, whether or not children should receive school lunches and vouchers. Where we have the restaurant industry, the food industry, restaurant industry, throwing away billions of dollars of food every year because they have to, because of state and local laws regarding perishable items. So there's a whole host of waste there that I think we could capture somehow and be less wasteful on that front. And then, of course, with regard to the folks that pick our food, the farm workers, the great state of California, where I live, where half of all farm workers, or close to it, are undocumented, we're now running into the insecurity of not being able to get this food picked in a timely manner before it rots and spoils in the orchards and the vines and the ground and so forth. So how much is that going to cost the nation? So I think,
So you're saying in the aggregate, the food insecurity problem is now being compounded?
that's arguing absolutely. Higher prices being raised. So a family of four going to the grocery store, does the mother cut back on fresh produce that might be going up in cost because it's too expensive in lieu of something more processed and all that? So there's also the health of the nation that could be impacted by these rising costs in terms of feeding your family with the best possible produce out there, food out there. And then, of course, you know, I think if you can feed people and keep them fed, you're going to cut down on medical costs because their health isn't going to decline, right? If you got to go out and eat fast food at $5, $10 a pop just to not starve, well, that's the worst food on the planet you can put inside your body. So what does that do to the health of the nation and its workforce and whatnot? So, you know, those are my thoughts, Gary, on that front. So yeah, no, we should not get rid of that. Yeah.
Thank you, David Les.
So, I learned a lot by listening to folks before me, and some of what I'm going to say has been said before. Very important is, in terms of hurricanes, is the ratio of false reports, telling people to go evacuate versus correctly versus non-correctly. And the more you get it right, the more people listen to you. That's the same, right? People are gonna listen to me versus if I am wrong too much of the time, you know, calling fire when there isn't really one. And that's where data comes in, and we need to be able to improve knowing where this thing's gonna land. And we have the computer power now to do that, but we also need perhaps better data to go into our models so we can predict better who should be evacuating and who should not.
So I've always said, Les, having covered, like I said, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes. I guess I'd have to go back and try to remember them all, but a lot of hurricanes. I've come to the conclusion, and obviously this is not something to be taken literal, that hurricanes have a mind of their own. So you could predict landfall is going to be at a certain location, and then it's like the hurricane's listening to these news reports and saying, well, I'm going to fool you, and then at the last second banks into a different direction and makes landfall elsewhere. And so it's really kind of inexact. So I think actually your point is that we need more data, not less. And I think that what I just explained lends credibility to your.
Well, yes, and you know, weather used to be more capricious, and then we had better modeling of the weather, and now I'm just shocked. I can get the hour by hour prediction of what the weather's going to be, and I can have a 10-day forecast that is accurate. And so technology can help there. In terms of the food banks, I would like to, I should say one more thing about hurricanes. And that is, I recall Brian Williams became famous for his coverage of Katrina. but it was all very, how horrible the people there were. You know, he was in this, you know, the population was acting like savages or something like, he was in this, what was it, this,
The Superdome?
sporting Superdome, thank you. And his reporting there, when you look back on it, was terrible.
Well, I can't comment on his reporting. I was sleeping on the tarmac of Louis Armstrong Airport. I had no idea what my colleagues were reporting, but it was a bad situation.
That's where a lot of, right, it was a bad situation, but people, wasn't because people were going into the law of the jungle, which is the kind of stuff he was
I
putting
think
out.
some of that did happen. I think there was very little security, no policing. You know, there were a lot of New Orleans cops who did not report for duty. They evacuated. You know, so there was a shortage of cops. It was really an extremely chaotic situation. I can't even begin to describe to you how chaotic it was in both the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, where I was, and in New Orleans, which I was there for 3 weeks. So I'm very familiar with there were no landmarks in some cases.
Yeah,
no street
was
signs.
chaos, but there wasn't.
It was unbelievable.
And he was just reporting on speculations that turned out not to be true.
I'll have to go back and see that because I did not hear that information was inaccurate, but it might have been. But go ahead on the food bank.
And I'd just like to say, in terms of food bank, out here, well, I think a lot of places, a place called the Second Harvest, and it's the idea of gleaning. You have food that, you know, they take off the shelves for one reason or another. It's still good, but maybe there's too much of this for the demand or whatever. And also the government used to distribute it through these food banks as well. And, you know, the companies do it because they're nice, but some folks also do it, and this is not bad, but there are, you know, the government subsidizes it by having a tax write-off. So it is costing taxpayers in the sense that somebody's got to make, it goes, it either increases the deficit, so either you got to pay more taxes now to make up for it, or it in the future. And it's not a bad system, but I'm just saying that we are, government is paying for it in the sense that these companies aren't paying what they would normally pay for all the government services. They don't have to pay the same tax rate that they would have paid without the write-off.
So Les, I'm looking right now with regard to the Superdome, and it's really ironic because, as I said, I was there, but I was never in the Superdome. So I was unaware of whether the reporting was accurate or inaccurate. You're absolutely right that it was inaccurate. It's all been debunked subsequently. There were two investigations, one by the New York Times and a review by the LA Times, that found that the more sensational claims were unfounded. There were no sexual assaults, but sexual assaults were reported. There were no gun battles, but gun battles were reported. There were no multiple homicides. In fact, only one verified death committed suicide by jumping from an upper level. There were problems there, a lot of problems. It was overcrowded. There were 30,000 people there. The heating system went down. The medical supplies were limited, and the number of people there to help the people were limited. But this exaggeration of how people were treating one another while huddled in the Superdome. And I did not know until today that that was untrue. So I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. That's really extremely.
Yeah, so I was surprised too. And as you know, Brian Williams was disgraced for making crap up for a different story.
Right, and then he was on a military airplane that flew into enemy fire or something like that.
Right. And
I've never understood why a guy who reaches that stature. I mean, I've never understood the exaggeration by reporters to put themselves, make them. You know, this is why you're not supposed to be part of it. You're not supposed to be. And it's not about you. Even if that plane came under fire, it's not about you being so brave as to have gone through that. The story is that this is what our military has to endure. It's not about Brian Williams. At any rate, I know some people do that. We're all human, and you're going to have frailties among journalists as well. But once you reach a certain stature, why would you do that unless you've been doing it all along, that it becomes just second nature to you to do it? That's absolutely stupid what he did. But he's not the only one. I mean, we know that Hillary Clinton lied about her and her daughter coming under fire on the tarmac of a military base once and stuff like that. And Joe Biden embellished a little fight. Erode public confidence in journalism and in government. It's, you know, and by the way, not all of the New Orleans came from the minds of the journalists. A lot of that was, it came from the mouths of the New Orleans officials into the ears of the journalists. So there's that.
Well, I want to tell you, you asked, why did Brian Williams do this starting when he was, you know, big guy? And as we just saw, that's how he became a big guy. He made up sensational stories that got him on the air. And also, he looked like an anchor.
Right, yeah, right. He was typecast very well. Look, I know a guy, I'm not going to say his name, he's still in the business, but he did a story where a guy reporting, and by the way, it's accurate that this was happening in Detroit at the time, that people in public would be shooting up during the heroin craze. I've seen it myself, driving down the street. I've seen people on street corners shooting up in public view. They're so whacked out they don't care where they are while they're shooting up. I've actually recently seen it, meaning in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, somebody had his works out and was shooting up. It happens. But what this guy did, he ended up paying these guys to shoot up on camera for him. He paid them. He paid them to shoot up on camera. And when the story came out, he felt that he had paid and he got discredited. But guess what? He didn't lose his job. And in fact, he went on to bigger and better things. I would never hire a guy like that. Never. Well, you're done, as far as I'm concerned, for doing that. So I know it happens, and it shouldn't happen, but it does on occasion. I was unaware of Wynn's reporting at all. I mean, I was there, and he was there, but I'm sure he was unaware of my reporting as well. Thank you, Les. Brian, and then Bam gets the last word. Brian.
Hey, Gary. Bottom line, I think both of them are necessary programs, and here's what convinced me. First of all, what everybody, I think, so far from what I heard, is getting wrong about the weather information, and I think you did touch on it, is it's microwave information. And this microwave information is the same kind of microwave that we have in our microwave ovens. This anywhere. This is coming from the Department of Defense. And what this does is it measures the water in these storms. So, you know, when you were talking about, I forgot what they were called, surprise morning storms or something you were mentioning, that detects the amount of water and whether that storm is going to blow up, you know, whether it's you know, it might come in a certain category and then blow up to a higher, you know, it measures, basically it just measures the water in the storms, and that type of information is unique that they were getting it from the Department of Defense. The articles I read didn't mention any other alternatives to that. I mean, there may be out there. I don't know if there is. You know, the Trump administration is citing cybersecurity reasons for not giving it out to the NOA anymore, and also budget and layoffs. The food bank, you know, at first I was like, you know, there's all kinds of food banks. There's food stamps, you know, I don't know, not sure what the big deal is on that, but I did some reading up on it, and there's two main programs, and forgive me because I forgot the name of them, that are canceled. And what these are, they're actually not only are food banks, but they provide healthy food and meat and vegetables to schools for school lunches. And this program is twofold. Not only does it provide it to the banks and to the schools, but it also buys it from local farmers. So you're providing these farmers a market for their food, and providing them a job and income, and the food is going to a good place. And you know, you really hate to see that type of food not go to the schools, you know, for our children. You know, a lot of children, they don't get a good meal at home, and you know, that's one reason that the schools you know, the school districts try to provide them a good meal. And you know, you really hate to see this stream of food not be provided to our children, and let alone people that need it. And another reason the food bank part was important is that, you know, I was reading that food stamps, although you might qualify, they don't provide you enough. You know, you might fall short by the end of the month or something, or you may not be able to buy that. I didn't quite understand that, but you might not be able to buy the same kind of food that you get from the food bank fills in the gaps, so to speak. So there is, you know, there is a purpose for it, and I do have, you know some folks that do receive the SNAP program, and I do, they live in a different state, but I do recall them saying that they go to the church food banks, you know, sometimes because they either need something that they couldn't buy because they ran out by the end of the month or whatever. But I think that all of these things are good, and what really upsets me is, you know, we're not. You know, they want to cut the deficit, but they're taking away these valuable things that help people, but yet give tax breaks to the rich, and it's just not a balanced way to do things. And you know,
well, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but the first most expensive thing in the federal ledger is in fact social programs. 3 of them: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Well, I don't know why you and the government want to call Social Security a social program when people pay into that all their lives that they work. And the rich people, they stop paying out of their income at a certain rate, so rich people really get a pass a certain amount voluntarily.
Yes, and if we don't figure out a way to solve it, it's going to run out of money.
Well, that don't make it a social program, and it pisses me off when people call it one. It's not freaking welfare. It's not welfare. It's not welfare.
You are arguing against what the president who put this in place was. He argued that it was a social welfare program in 32. That was what he argued. If you don't like,
how in the hell can it be a social program when it was taken out of my income all my life and paid into that program? That's a pension. That's not a welfare program. I'm not going out there handing for handouts. I don't care what anybody call it. It's not a social program. You don't pay out of your pocket all your life for a social program.
It's defined as a social program in government.
Well, it's wrong.
Not just government speak, but in law. Well,
it's
you
wrong.
think it's wrong. You think it's wrong.
So when I get my pension from work, that's a so when I retire from work, I'm getting a social program from work. That's bullshit. You don't know what, yeah, they may call it that, but it's not true.
Private sector pension plan, is that fine?
It's the exact same thing. I paid into it and the money compounds. You know, and the Social Security would be there if Congressmen had got their ass in there and started robbing from it.
Well, here's the point. The point is, Marshall said there are three areas that are the highest expenditure of government money. But the distinction that I think Brian is making is that Social Security is not government money. It's not tax money. It's the person's money that he or she put into the system. It's not tax money.
I don't disagree with you, but
okay,
I would tell you that the Republican and Democratic leaders in both the House and the Senate have disagreed.
No.
They've brought the trust fund to the tune of about $4 trillion over about a decade. And their excuse for it is that it's intergovernmental borrowing. So you can rob Peter to pay Paul and make Social Security go bankrupt in 2034 because Dick Armey and someone else like Nancy Pelosi, I'm only referencing her because she was speaker for a long time, ended up doing that, right? They robbed to the tune of about $4 trillion. To put that in perspective, that is 4 World Trade Centers built entirely out of $100 bills. That's what $1 trillion is. And we've been spending
right,
that way. My point, Brian, is that regardless of what you think, those social programs, as defined by FDR, we call them social programs, they eat up the first line in federal expenditures. The next one is the interest on our debt. The third one is the military. And the fourth one is everything else we spend.
But anyway, what does that have to do with what we were talking about in the first place, though, which was the food bank and the weather?
You got off on
Not sure how you got off on that.
I got there by noting that when you're talking about the government cutting money, that it would make sense that the government would look at the largest line item to cut.
Well, these really aren't, comparatively though, what we're talking about today are not very big line items, really. Not much that the DOGE cut was really large items.
Well, especially with regard to the satellites. Those are Department of Defense satellites. They're not going to deactivate them. So the satellites are still gathering whatever information they are gathering, not just weather information, I suspect, but who knows. They're not going to deactivate it. And I bet you, dollars to donuts, the microwave information is still being analyzed because they need to know for troop movement and to where to put our ships safely based on hurricanes. So I bet it's not like they're going to turn a blind eye to the information up there. They're just not going to make it available to NOAA to make it available to the general public. Correct in my assumption, and I acknowledge what I just stated was an assumption, then why do you do it? Why do you do it? What gain is there? The other things that this administration has done, the cuts that they've made, they make an argument that people may agree with. Some people may disagree with their argument on ways. I still don't see the reason why they want to cut information that could save property and lives. Why? And I don't think anybody has been able to explain that, even those who took to the stage
to say that it was cybersecurity in budget.
I don't understand the cybersecurity issue.
Then what do you mean by budget, Brian?
No, well, the saving money.
I don't think that was. They never even said how. They've never said how the money would be saved. They never said how much money would be saved. So you could say all you want. I'm doing this because it saves money. That doesn't make it so. So
but that's
if in fact, right. So if in fact
if in fact it's saving money, then is it not incumbent upon the government to explain to me, who lives along the coast, why they are trying to, where they're saving money, how much money is being saved, so that I have an understanding of why they make my life at greater risk today than it was yesterday, literally?
Right.
I mean,
That's what I had.
read the federal directive from OMB on why they collect back the money in the first place.
It would require the government answering that question. You don't think this
Well, what I was
question...
going to say was I'm fairly certain in order to get an answer, you would have to submit a FOIA. I don't think you get an answer out of the Trump administration without submitting a FOIA.
Well, whether submitting a FOIA would be successful or not is not the issue. The issue is, why have they not explained this to the American people? The only answer they say is that the news media are sensationalizing the issue. That's their answer.
It readily explains stuff. It didn't readily explain stuff under Bill Clinton, and neither George W. Bush, neither Obama.
Well, we're not talking about Bill Clinton.
Well, no. My point is, there are lots of administrations that don't provide that kind of rationale. It's rather more.
Well, we're not talking about those administrations today, and we won't be talking about the Trump administration. The next generation of chief executives. We'll be talking about that generation of chief executives. I guarantee you that if this forum is still alive, I will make this pledge. You can write this down and throw it in my face, that if the next president of the United States is a Democrat, and people come up to the stage when we are critiquing that Democratic governor, that Democratic president, and say, but Trump did that, I'm going to shut him up. I don't care what Clinton did, because it has nothing to do with our discussion at hand. If Clinton did something,
exercise the same behavior.
no, it doesn't. So two wrongs make a right?
No. I didn't say two wrongs made a right. I said it's the normal way the presidency is functioning in my life.
Define normal. So if it's normal, we shouldn't critique it, because it's normal.
No, I think critiquing normal things is a good idea.
Oh, okay. Then why did you bring it up in the first place?
Why did I bring it up with Brian in the first place? I felt like it was important to make the distinction when talking about cutting money that one of the places one should look is at the top expenditure in the federal budget, regardless of whether we like what that means or not. Let me answer your question. Let me answer the question based on the philosophy that you're trying to articulate, and see if understanding your point of view. So if under President Trump, he authorizes the extrajudicial killing of an American citizen on land, that is criticized. Well, Obama did it, so it's normal. So that just shuts up all criticism of current presidents. For sure, if we're going to do that, with all of the transgressions by this president, the subsequent presidents are indemnified from criticism. Indemnified, because anything a future president does, well, at least it's not Trump. Look what Trump did. Look what Trump did. We're indemnified, Gary. I simply think it's important to point out that the Trump administration is not unique in the way they're exercising this. That probably the better criticism is that this is the way the system is functioned as a whole, and it's unhealthy overall. But that it is normal. It's a normal that we shouldn't have, but it is normal. My point in saying that is the presidents, every president, references in legal opinions the person who was president before them.
But I'm not a president. I'm not a president, and I'm not a president. Neither are you. So okay, name one program that Bill Clinton cut without explaining to the American people why that program was cut. Name one.
Medicare. He argued that he cut about 50%, but all he really did was cut about 50% of 1% of spending.
And did he? But he cut Medicare, and he did not explain why he cut Medicare.
He cut Medicare, and he didn't explain properly how he cut it.
Oh, properly.
He cut it
properly. But he did offer an explanation.
He cut it and made it sound like he was cutting 50% of something.
But he gave but he did give an explanation. He was disingenuous.
An explanation, but yes, an explanation.
And so what was his explanation? Not for the amount, but for why he cut Medicare.
Getting in line with Gingrich, but this is my childhood, so I can.
Okay, so but you brought up Clinton, not me. So that's why I'm asking you, Clinton. So he did give an explanation. It may not have been a satisfactory explanation, but he did give an explanation, right?
Sure, Gary, but if we analyze the Clinton presidency, I'm absolutely 100% positive we can find areas in which Clinton did not explain to the American public. Like, I don't mistake my position for being one of want, because it's not. I don't want the world to be like that. But the world is like that.
I know, but Marshall, we cannot critique a current president under the cloud of, well, if we critique a current president, Marshall's going to say, well, this is normal because so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so did it.
It doesn't mean it doesn't need reform, Gary.
Then why do you bring it up? What's the purpose of bringing it up?
Because the Trump administration is often lifted up as an example of a president that is unlike any other president.
Nobody has said that today in the course of this discussion. So why do you bring it up then? Nobody said that. Nobody said that only Donald Trump has done something like this. Maybe they think it, but nobody has said it. Nobody's articulated.
Because the emphasis has been on the Trump administration.
Because the Trump administration is the administration in power and making these decisions.
I don't disagree. Decisions are not simply in a vacuum. They are able to use their predecessors' reasoning for what they do. If I had my way and I could wave a magic wand, I would tell you that it's normal, but that it needs to stop right now.
So are you going to bring this up every time there's a critique of the president that previous presidents did things?
If it is one in which I feel like we're focusing in on the administration to the detriment of previous administration's tone setting, sure. I don't feel like I need to bring that up every time. But if we are using the Trump administration as an exemplar of things that are not going right or should not be done, it does help to know whether that was behavior that happened to the presidency previously or whether it was not. You can then take that behavior, even if it's normal, and say, guys, this has been considered normal for quite a long time. It shouldn't be. We need to do something different.
I don't see how it advances. I don't see how it advances the conversation with specifically the topic at hand by doing this. That's like saying if my neighbor is a criminal and did something that's heinous, and we're discussing it. Well, yeah, but this guy did something too, and the other one did something too. We're not talking about what the other person did. We're talking about what this person
Gary,
did.
it's not about that. It's about the use of power. If it wasn't objected to under 3 or 4 different presidencies, then why are we objecting to it now?
Now we get to the heart of the matter. Now we get to the heart of the matter. What is the use of us critiquing the current president if what the current president does is normal? Maybe I'll make that the subject of tomorrow's discussion. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. So until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow, for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
مرحبا لبنان ثانك يو ايترا فرصي لمشو ايترا
لا لاني لا تكون يسار يزال
اوكي فكاش يسار
مرحبا وعقدوا من هذا حن الزوم مهران يساق على إلى سوري لحد ندير يلقى عمل عقله ما عندي سوار هاون بقدر فيه نمني نيرو تسعن حادن انتي خبلك عدلي ولا أبقال سيت أبقال سيت بوليتيكا وطلو غير عطاي نيرو بزبا وطلو غي سبعت ما جرشات طلو مالتي تزنا برا قد لسي مسوات الخفيلو عاوت نخمس فانتا زي كوينس الناس عن نتيجة وطرق منا حجي قالي صوم مان اليوم مدقي قام كي تقنني نتانا فرانشو عادتن عامت زنا برا تسي تسكذا انت هيدا سكفر له مسرح الرأي كل صوم وموسى علم بسياسة منتي ናይ ግዜያዊ ጥቕሚ ኢልና እንዲና ጌርናዮ ኣንተ ወይ ኤርትራ ጠቂስዋ ነይሩ ብሸካ ዝመን ካልእ ከኣትዎ ሓሲቡ ነይሩ ናይ ቀዳሙ ቀዳሙ ሲያሳ ከምተን ካልኦት ናይቲ ከባቢና ናይ ውግን ወረ ውግን ክኸውን ዝመድብ ግን ምስ ወስቋም ኮይና ካብቲ ዝገርመካ ነገራት ብዛዕባ መንግስት ሆኒ ሓደ ነገር ክብልና እቲ ዝሓየለ ካብ መሳርሒታት ኣብ ሓደ እዋን ያኔ ካብ ሚሳይል በሎ ዋላ ዝረዓለ መዳፍዕ ገለ መለታት ህዝባዊ ሓይሊ እዩ መንግስትና ናይ ብሓቂ ካብ ብዘይቀልዓለ ነዚ ሕጂ ንኮርዓሉ ኣብ ቀርኒ ኣፍሪቃ ከም ማለት ስልዕልና ስለዝስማዓና ነትናትና ከነቃወሕ ገለ ስለዝበልና ኣብ ባይታ ዘሎ ዝገልፀና ማለት እዩ ማለት ነፍስና ዝኸኣልና ብህዝብና ንቆርዕ ኣብ ልብና ንነፍሕ ምስ ናይ ካልኦት ካል የመን ፀጋም ዘይንግበር ዳስ ዋይ ዝጠርር ነገር ጌርና ሕጂ እንታይ ንምባል እቲ መንግስቲ ግን ክድመት ልቢ ናይ ህዝቡ ይሰሚዕ እዩ ይርዳዩ ምስ ወስቆ እዩ ነዊሕ ግዜ ኣብ ቃልሲ ተተኪኑ ዝሓልፍ ዋናት እዩ ጥቕሉ ሳዕርታት እውን እዩ ሶዛ ሕጂ ጉዳይ ቀዲማ ደላ ንዛ ዘምፃኻ ደጋጊሞ ግድማዕ ምሮኣን ኤርትራን ኣይ መድለየትን እስኪ ንግዜ መግደፋ ኩሉ ሰዕ ከዓኒ ወንፂ ተረኪቡ ኣብ ናይ መጨረሻ ኣብ ጣውላ ያኻታሹ ክገብራ ትኽእል እዛ ፖርሽን ተረኪባ እሞ ከዓኒ ምስቲ ዝሓለፍ ወሳት ሕጂ እውን ዝርድኦም ዶ ሓደ ባሓቂ ነቶም ናይ ባሓቂ ከዕም ክፁና ዝደልዩ በዚ ናይ ፅምዶ ሓይሊ ጌርና ናይ ባሓቂ ንጥርናዕ ነበር እቲ ጉዳይ ናናለ እዚ ኣያ ክብል ደልዮ እሞ ኣፍታ ዝነበረት ናይ መማሃራን ይመስኸላ እምበርካ ድወካዋላ ቴንኪዩ ይሆናየ
مرحبا سبا بدينا نسلك مو قال حتى مو يوتيوب حتى اللوسة
فالأخي يمينة عفيرة ما يمثل
أنا لا بايت عندي مثل ندير
هو احنا لها
عندما تخاف أنا حد شمام نجمير ويخاف ديسكونكت خان أبز غيري لأني مسنا مكينة كونكت دنيا بزغنا أنت يتصبت نالس مليس كالون دي خان تسفلت أبانيش أنت يكون صار لي مستطور ورا قد ما بيلو الزاربات نبرة تسفلت حد ቴንኪ ደድልዮ ይኮነን እንዲሁ ከም ተስፋለት እንድሕር ኣለኹም ኣብዚ ዜጋታት እቲ ዕላማ ናይቲ ገዛ ኹን ናይ ዝኾነ ይኹን ሃገራዊ ሚድያታት ይኹን ሃገራዊ ፅሑፋት ኩሉ ኮማት ንበሎ ኩሉ ትካላት ኤርትራዊ ሃገራዊ ትካላት ሲ ዕላምኡ እንታይ እዩ እንድሕር ኢልና ነቲ ተጋጊድ ፀንሐ ንምእራም እዩ ወይ ንምብራህ እዩ ሽግር ተረኺቡ ዘሎ ሕጂ ክርድኦ ዘይፀንሐ ዜጋ ወይ እውን ኣንፃር መስመር ሒዙ ዝፀንሐ ዜጋ ሕቶታት ከልዕል ንጉር ቅቡልካ እዩ ዋላ እቲ ካልእ እውን ሕቶታት ከልዕል የብሉን ኣይኮነን እሱ ሕቶታት ኣልዒሉ ትንዑ ሕርግርግ ዝብልዎ ዘይርድእዎ ክንፅረሉ ዋላ ሚልዮን ግዜ ተሓተተ ፀገም የብሉ ፀገም ተረኺቡ ዘሎ ትምህር ዝፀንሐ ክሰብኽ ዝፀንሐ ሃገራዊ ኢሉ ቅድሚት ፀኒሑ ብዙሕ ስራሕ ክዓይ ፀኒሑ ትብሎ ወይ እውን ኣብቲ ሃገራዊ መስርሑ ፀኒሑ ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ኤርትራውነትን ኤርትራን ፖለቲካ ናይ ኤርትራን ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ቃልሲ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ እቲ መስርሕ ክሓልፎ ፀንሐ ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ግን ግርግር ክብል ጥራይ ደይኮነስ ክፅይቕ ክትሪኦ ከለካ ይሸጋሪ እቲ ናይ ኣብ ካልእ መረዳእታት ፀንሖ ሰብ ግርግር ክህልዎ ንጉር እዩ ማለሲ ከም ንጉር እያ ንዝቕበሎ ኣብኡ ቅሬታ የልዎንን ብዝተኻእለ መጠን ዓቕመይ ካብቲ ዘለዎን ላዕሊ ወሲኸ ዓቕሊ ወሲኸ መረዳእታ ክዕብል ኣይደለኒ እምበር ንምንታይ ዝሓተትካ ከማን ክብሎ ንኸምኡ ዓይነት ዜጋ ቅቡል እውን ኣይኮነን ፀገም ረኺብና ዘለና ኣብቲ መስርሕ እቲ ፀኒሐ ዝብል ሰብ እዩ ፀገም እንዳኾነ ዝኸይድ ዘሎ መብቲ ስራሕቲ ክዓይ ፀኒሐ ዝብል ሰብ እዩ ፀይቂ እንዳኾነ ዝኸይድ ዘሎ ኣብዚኣ ሕጂታ ፀገም ዝፍጠር ዘላ እምበር ተስፌ ሚል ስናይ ዋላ ድሕመመን ይኹን ዋንታታይ ኮይኑ ዘይርድኦ ዋላ እንዳበልኩ ተደጋግሞ ጥራይ ኣይደለን ምክንያቱ ቅቡል እዩ እዚ ምክንያቱ ስክፍታ ስለ ዝፀንሐካ ወይ እውን ሕርግርግ ስለ ዝብለካ ዝፀንሕካ ይካብኩ ኣብ ካልእ መስመር ትፀንሕ እንተ ብጌጋ ኣረዳዳ እንተ ብቁኑዕ ልቦና ኣብ ጌጋ መስመር ምፅናሕ ስለ ዘይተረዳእካ እዩ ወይ ስለ ዘይተቐበልካ እዩ ተቐቢለ ክትብል ዝፀናሕካ እዩ ትሽግር ኮይኑና ዘሎ ልዕሊ ሰብካ ክትምድር ዝፀንሕካ እዩ ፀገም ኮይኑና ዘሎ ሰባት ከተጋጊ ኮነ ኢልካ ዕንኪኪ ከተብሎ ንጉዳያት ምስኦም እዩ ፀገም ተረኺቡ ዘሎ ኣነ ብዞም እምኒ ክድርቢ ዝፀንሑ ፀገም የብለይን ኣብ ጌጋ ፖለቲካዊ መረዳእታት ፀንሐ እውን ፀገም የብለይን ለውጢ የድልየኒ ኢሉ ክሓትት ዝፀንሐ ሰብ ፀገም የብለይን ምስ ኩሎም ፀገም የብለይ እዚኣቶም ምክንያቱ እዚኣቶም ናቶም መረዳእታ መርገፅን ሒዞም ዝፀንሑ እዮም ሕጂ ተስፊ እንታይ ክብል ደልየ ነግረ መገደይ ክትሓትት እስኻሲ ልዕሊ ማንም ሰብ መሰል ኣለካ ስለምንታይ ንዓኻ ክርዳእካ ዝፀንሐ ናትካ ርኤት ዓለም ካልእ ስለ ዝፀንሐ ቅቡልካ እዩ እስኻ ሕጂ ናብቲ ሓደ መስመር ክትመፅእ ከለካ ምስናይ ስክፍትኻን ከም ዝኽንዕሎ ፀንሕና ናብዚ ምስ ትግራይ ዘለና ኩነታት ምስናይ ስክፍታና ኢና ንኸዶ ቅቡልካ እዩ ክስከፍ ሰብ ቅቡልካ እዩ ሰብ ክሓትት ቅቡልካ እዩ ሰብ ክጠራጠር ንምንታይ ተጠራጠርካ ትብሎ ሰብ የለን እዚኣ ክትንፅረልካ ደልን ተስፊኹም ካልኦት ኩላትኩም ስለምንታይ ኣይትሕተቱ ከይመስል ትኻልእ ሕተቱ መረዳእታኹም ኣነፅር ኣቢልኩም ሕተቱ ኣብ መትከሉ ፀንሐ ሰብ እዩ ወላቕ ዘሎ ክብር ዘየድልዮ ነገራት ክዛረብ ነቲ መስርሕ ክዝርግ ኮለል ዝብል ዘሎ ሰብ እዩ ንዓና ሽግር ኮይኑና ዘሎ እዚኣ ክትንፅር ደልየ ኣለኹ ኤርትራ ፈርስት ኣንቶይ ፅቦት እንዲኻ መሊስካ
ኣካልኻ ርኣ ፅቡቕነቱ እንዲኻ ስኻ ኣምፂኻ ምሳ እቲ ቀንዲ ነገር እንታይ ይመስለካ እቲ ግዳይ ዝፀንሐ ህዝቢ እቲ እዚ ገዛ ዝተኸፈተሉ ምክንያት ልካ ከምዛ ዝበልካ ንዓኻትኩም ንምርዳእ እዩ ነቲ ክሳብ ሕጂ ሸለል ተባሂሉ ሰብ ድሓን ርድኦ ይፈልጦ እዩ እናበልካ ብዙሕ ሰብ ኣብ ጌጋ መገዲ ኸይዱ ክግለፅ ኣይፀንሐን ሕጂ ግን እቲ ናይ ኤርትራዊ ቻነላት እናበዝሐ እቲ ሓቅታት ክግለፅ ኣብ ሃገራዊ መስመር ሰብ ክመፅእ ክትሪኦ ከለካ እውን ንቡር እዩ ሕጂ ዘይንቡር ነገር ኣይኮነን ተጓኒፉ እቲ ወያነ ፀኒሑ ወፂኻ ደይ ምዝራብ ማዕረ ነቲ ሓደ ፕሮፓጋንዳ ደይ ምህራም ድኽመታት ስለ ዝፀንሓና ነቲ ድኽመት ተኣሚኑሉ ኩሉ ሰብ ወፂኡ ክሰርሕ ኣብ ቅድሚት ወፂኡ ሕጂ ንምንታይ ሓቲትካ ወይ ገሌልካ ንሰብ ክትጓየቆ ይብልካ ኣነ ኣነላኔሳ ዋላ 80 ግዜ ሕተት ዋላ 70 ግዜ እንድሕር ደኺምካ ንካልእ ትሕልፈሉ ንስኻ መልሻ ትብሎ እምበር እቲ ዝፀንሐ ፀቕጢ ኣብ ልዕሊ ኤርትራውያን ኣብ ጌጋ መርገፅ ንክኸዱ ብዓበይቲ መንግስታት ተሓንፂፁ ክሳዕ ማዓስከራት ተሰሪሑሎም ንዕኦም ንምድንጋር ዝተገብረ ኣነ ወይ ሮሃ ተዛሪቡ ነፅዮ ጉዳይ ኣይኮነን እቲ ክብደት ናይቲ ስራሕ ምስ ኣተኻ የርዳእካ እቲ ኣነ ንርእሰይ ሕጂ ናተይ ተመክሮ ክዛረብ ተኮይነ ስኒ ኣብዚ ገዛ ክመፁ ከለኹ ስኒ ኣብ ትግራይ ተገብረ ግፍዕታት ኣይርዳእንን እዩ ነይሩ ከምዚ እንደይ ኣቃሊለ የድርየ ነይረ ክሳዕ ክንዲዚ ግን ኣብዚ ተወርዋሪ ኮፍ ኣቢሉ ነዞም ብማዓስከራት ተሓለፉ እንታይ ከም ተጓነፈ ክሓቶም ከሎ ግን ጥልቀት ናይቲ ስራሕ እናተረዳእኒ በዝዩ ሽዑ ስራሕ ከዓ ክንደይ ክሳዕ ክንደይ ሓይሊ ኣብ ድሓትት ክሳዕ ክንደይ በብተኻእለና ሽዑ ዋላ 5 ደቂቕትኹን መፂኻ እቲ ፅፍሓት ናይቲ ስራሕ ስለ ዝርዳእካ እቲ ተገብረ ዕንወት ኣብ ልዕሊ መንእሰያትና ስለ ዝርዳእካ ክትሰርሕ ትግደድ ሕጂ ንምንታይ ቀልጢፉ ደይትረድኦ ይትብልኒ ሕጂ ሓንቲ ብዚኣ ግና ክነፅራ ዝደሊ ብፍላይ ኣብዛ ፅምዶ እንድሕር ዘይ ኣይተረዳእንን እሞ እዚ ፅምዶ ክኸይድ የብሉን ኢልካ ምዝራብ ግን ምስ ፀላኢኻ ትስራዕ ዘለካ እዚ ሕጂ ንፁር ላይን እዩ ምክንያቱ ፅምዶ ደይደልዩ ሸቀልትን ኣሸቀልትን ነቶም ኣሸቀልቲ እውን ኣሸቀልቶም ተሰሪዖም ኣለዉ እዚ ፅምዶ ዝሕሚሞዎም ዘሎ ምክንያቱ ንሰላም ስለ ንብል ዘለና ሰላም ደይደልዩ ኣብዚ ከባቢ ኣብ ውግእን ኣይውግእ ኣይ ሰላም ገይሮም ክሕዝዎ ዝደልዩ ሓይልታት ፅምዶ ምስ መፀ ፀላዕላ ኢልዎ ሕጂ ክንፅረልና ዘለዎ ኩላና ከይንዳናገር እቲ ፅምዶ እንድሕር ዘይተረዳእካ ኣብ ከምዚ ዓይነት መድረኻት መፂኻ ሕተት እንታይ እዩ ኣይርዳእን እዩ ዘሎ ከመይ ጌርና ምስኦም ስራሕ ከመይ ጌርና ንኣምኖም ድሕሪ ሕጂ ከምቲ ቀደም ተገበሩና ተገበሩና እዚታት ኩሉ ንቡር ሕቶታት እዩ ድሕር ምስ ግዜ ንሕና ከዓ ኩሉ ተተመክሮና በበታ ንፈልጣ ንእሽተይ ንዛረብ ድሓር ካብ ናይ ኩላህና ሰሚዕካ ወይ እቲ ናትካ ስክፍታታት እውን ናይ ካልእ ሰብ ስክፍታ ምዃኑ ምስ ተረዳእካ እሱኡ ንሓገዝ ኮነ ግን ብምንታይ ኣብኡ ንሰርሕ ከም ዘለና እቲ ንሕና ምክንያታትን ነጊርናካ ንዓኻ እውን ሓገዝ ኮነካ እዩ ግን ከይተረዳእካ ፅምዶ እንታይ ምዃኑ ከይኮነ ፅምዶ ክኸውን የብሉ ፅምዶ ውግእ ደምፂ ፅምዶ ከምዚ ዝገብር ኢልካ ክዛረብ ከለካ እቶም ፀላእትና ዝብልዎ ስለ ትደግም ዘለካ ናይ ፀላኢ መሳርሒ ከዓ ትኸውን ሕጂ ኣብዚ ክንጥንቀቕ ኣለና እንድሕር ዘይተረዳእካ ስቕ ኢኻ ትብል ኣብ ከምዚ ቦታታት መፂኻ ካ ትሓትት ኣብቲ ድምልከቶም ኣካል ጌትካ ትሓትት ተነፅሮ ሽዑ ፈፂምካ ኣነ ኣይኣምነሉን እዚ ክፈርስ ኣለዎ ኢልካ ድሕር መርገፅ ወሲድካ ካ መርገፅካ እዩ ግድን ኣብዚ እቶ ይንብለካ ኢና ግን ንሕና ስራሕ እንታይ ብጌጋ ከይርድኦ ነቲ ፅምዶ ተወርዋሪ ብነዊሕ ገሊፅዋ ሓንቶ ናይ ሰላም መስርሕ ከምዃኑ ስርሐይ ኣነ ሚስ ካልኩሌሽን ከይገብሩ ነቲ ፅምዶ ብጌጋ ከይርድእዎ ፀላእትና ከም ድኽመት ገይርእይዎ ከም ፍርሓት ገይርእይዎ ኣገዳሲ ነጥብታት እዩ ዝሞ እዚኣ ክውፅልካ ኢለ ቴንክ ዩ
Thank you, Rita first. Mo kala ito zalo. Kaya basta zalo.
اليوم كمرقز كخمية بتكون
ኣሸጊራትና እኒያ ዘለና ሳ ንኣቶም ኣሸጊሮምና ዘለዉ ሰባት ኮያ
أنا أي توقعني يتعرس بعلو من قصة وزيت ذي نظاري وأنا أي
أتصمدني يوم حنت مده قاعد يا نعمل مع خنا سراتي كنا
نعين اليوم أنا ممكن يوم أستوعب أبدأ كملت مندي كاتستي إن شاء الله يوم يترافرس
ولا لبونا أنا أتصدق يا وعد كان ما يبزح طبعا ما يبزح بتشاق كيم لك ما يبزح بيكاسي كا وحتى أمر هيك الله صار فتوصى هذا الحاجة وعد هذا
ليه ما يصير مرحبا
أوه
مرحبا عدم رفتن شيء تهبس مرحبا دحانتر سمعت وإلا حطيتها تايدا كلما هرتايدا كلما هركب زلاي هم جو مثلا كيف لما نخرج هرتايدا إنه يمكن صبوت ثورينا عن كويس وكير قال لي سو خلاص وقتنا بن كله وقتنا كلكم بتعب زلكم قلت وصلي مالتي صبوت نتيو كاتب بلس ما أبي اللي بتاع أنت ما أدري سنة متى غربا كان متى حسبت تتبلع تصدق مالتي وتجي هنا أزيد وإلا دلنا إن مهارات قفينا مالتي وسلم تعزو الناسي بزح ممكن أصينا نتايد لنا مالتي لذي أزي معنا أنا أدري يامو تعمل صبح بقى أبان تفضل أستغله بزخون سي كم حتى يوا الجنبا سوى غيره حتى ولا تغيره حتى واحد يا بزخون سي تاخذ دليسي زي ذو على صبح ديو بتعمل صبح عطوي ووري زارون بس بقى عم تحكي يسوى تكاو كمال في سين كيف كمال كل سب صبح زارون شيء بمود ومالتي كن أرتي صبح غير سمع أسباب نوكو أسرع وسيلة بريكسي سيكون النير ما تزوجس وجسدي زي هنا تدلو من سيكون أو تحضر دلسي تقاسو كهام تقول لك سيكاسي بالمالتي زناي سودانا تيرو إتيسي تقاسي أبكا تقاسي سيك أسمى سي إفراسي لمن تايري كالستولو سلمن تايو دليت على النادي نعمل سياتي إفرا قلت على مسؤول كفل قدم خفف الجلسي كله دليت على النادي جل عدلنا حبنا زي مريج أنا ما أقول لنا فينا قليلا يكون فتقولنا زخفل كان متاي خلق أمراسي حتى من بوكيناسي قلت أنا زخفل كاسي حتى من بوكيناسي جواب بلوة سنة سلام زر بالله صباح جواب بلوة فعل كله أي خفلني توي هذا بلام كل يوم إحنا زي مريج أنا أقول لنا تكون تحمل مخنياتهم سمعت قربت لذا خدنا عددي جمع مالك بركل ساعات سبقات واحد مثل قال لي لا يكون حتى زي أدم أنا ذكر المتكشف تكشف مالتي ناسا ورا البرورة الجيسي كلنا يعني راح هذنا فرق مالتي شعينا أكينا أنا كنت تصوم قال مالتي قبل بعوض الناس 5 ساعات الناس توقعنا أكينا أنا كنت تصوم قال حتى زي أحجي نص إن وزينا سنزلنا حرب فأنا إحنا فرق ما ندري أكيد لنا أنا تعصرت فلتسي أنا تعصرت حديث بالاقتصادي مالتي أنا تعصرت خلص نسلم سلمنا ورح عم يجوا لكم دلوقتي نورحي شتي شيء كنا نقول دلوقتي نورح عم شيء يقول دلوقتي هجي بس أنا هنا هجي بس أتحب يسمع مالتي أنا بزان السيد شيء أنا برني شغلات مالتي مرة كفيل مالتي هجي ولا قدمي ونسمعني يا بينا تبي صومون كتصومون جلسي أصل نبغي سلزنا وقطع أنت جلست تسمعها نسلام سلمنا إذا لما نلو جلست تسمعها مالك لازم إنتي سمعنا حبس البديع مع بينا صبغة الحجي دحريني سوسات وما تنسترد أخذنا جن عصد أنا تحسب هذا مالتي عصد خطة جنتر رقنا تاجم يروم مالتي بس ما تحتري وحجي في فؤاد مقام بس سلامهم وزقاني حوال ذلك مالتي أبز جزيزة خاصة لما نسي كل شيء ما نسي حاجة سي أنا تيادر كل جزيء أتا حما كلها كلها صبغات مخفلون النبر نسي جواب لو نسلام سمو معلو أسلام لنا كميرنا أما بوحينا نقبلهم على هذا اللي ما يتزوج الإنسان نقبلهم فرقان مالك إجي سي الذي تدبر فيها أو إذا فينا فاجر فاز دبر سي سكرت ولا لو تصبغ يوم من سياتنا لقيو حتى تصبغي زي كررتوا من سيتلو حتى تصبغ مكنياتو أتزبغ مبارك أفتي أقول بلاد كلنا ويلي ما وتدرنا كم تسعة سبحان الله سب بنقطيتان سنقطيتان وحتى من سنقطة ساي أسرعت نتيجة رجعت نتيجة كل فرد ولا حد تفهم جيجا تفتين كي ترجع حاجة يقولوا هاني حدث ترجع كذا تجيب لها بس تملس كي أي ترجع أن أنت كي تملس موت أو شعور وترجعين مثلك كلا سبكي وتخبرها تسرع حالها ما ليش عرضوا منكم لنا خدي أحد زربات حيش نوح ما كان جيل زدت تجيرو وبنص أتهجرويان لا نزوج إيه بيقدر لنا حاجة سنة كل صح هجرويان توي لو ما أما كلام فريش أنتي مسوات اسمه كله عشان ده كده خدنا مسوات قليلة يكون المتجس كله والبرتي وجنزر وجزيري كل المتجس سبع عين بس يجوا إنسان يجي كم زقر وقال لها أنت أني قرباتنا السلام منكم مسؤول تقولنا مسوقة صبوا مبري السلام منكم مسؤولي صبوا مبري لازم تقبلي هذا لك هذا انت إذا اللي بتتسجل كنت إذا نوقف من نسيت له نقاس زي فوق ولا وقعت سوق هذا غني كذا راح يكون كان زي فايد أني نتقاسون سلمتاي قالس الله هو سلمتاي زبي قالس الله سلمتاي كني مسؤول خفل عليه كحسب كون كبير فهم تنسل تدانز كاتاشم جاك كسكرود أكو قطعي هجي سجدنا يكون برتا كذا أنا راح يكون نتقاس الردوي كل الردوي كيلان وعنهم تسبب تتعب بنفسه تبغى بنفسه تبغى بيسون بدو أعرض له ولا خبرت تدريها كم زي بلا على ما جاء مساعد كنا نقالوا مالتي في أطردهم كان زي عندي على الكيس كمان لا سبحة دي من الله صوت بقول سنة عاد باز وبقدر عاد تقبل دلو ناي صوتو ما قدر أنا سبحة بقى أخوني لهم كان مجنون يا ولا قدر ما تحسون مالتي أتوقع يوم سبيت أجازة كنا كايدا بقى مش أنا كنت سلام زيك المسبب كم سهجرون سلام زيك سهجرون كايدا أنت يوم مزبوطون دول لقيت كرتاكا يقول بالعمي زغير بقدامي تقول ورس كم نحب قدرتهم دري يومه هيكون النيلو وحبيب نحب قدرته هيكون فيلاني إزي صيفها تكال قبري لك أنا ما يزي ما تكسل زلهم علامة سلزلهم يوم زغرهم دري أبزي تنا هم بروح دلو ما من زيتنا وقت تمال كمان كنت يقولوا أتخاف في لمسي زي تمال كمان كنت يقولوا أتخاف في لم كنت يجوا أتخاف في لمسي كنا بروز قبوا أمسي سلمت يوم كوفينو ثلاثة صبح يسوي يوم أنا وقت دخلنا دلون إحنا كو نقولات زب المهنيات يبلان كل بلوز أزخفل وكل مهنيات يبلان كو مهنياتهم إحنا أكبرنا مريضنا ينادل لكن مريضنا هم ثلاثة كل بالأمازون نتمنى أقول بس حتى يقام تخافيلهم ماله سلس نزود أصدق كم تردور لك الجيز يوم عز دجاج زبل دلوس كم سلفة هذا حدثي نزي صوم تاسي بفاجأ لو واتر اليوم مهم إيه فرنسي إيه فرنسي اللي دايما هي مصروف على مثلا سيدة اللي كنتي مصروف كنتي تقدر من السيدة اللي مصروفي نفس الوقت من السيدة قوميا أنا حسب كم أكون زعل إنه بدي أقول لها مرة عشان يكون سي قال لعبتي زعبا زناي شو نقول نحن يقبلوني نحن نقول نفس نتاي دادل من داخل تفضل يوم بدي ذكره فايدر ولا فايدر هذا قول مو ذات أمتي نقبلها فرقان بري ولا حدي لا يحمل فايدة بس أنا أقول سكسي عندنا يا ولا أنتي وشلنا زنقرا وكنا تردي وفلا إذا كنت هل هذا نزلنا ناس الحساب نزلنا حساسية كايدة أنا زي إقرا كايدة تردي أنت دعني نعم حرة حسب مجيمسي صفو هم غايب بدا مزيوم منتاج زنقرا للنسي هم جاك هاترو بصرقة بالسلام دمتو بقى نحنا نتحدد متى دراوي ولا حرايدي متى بش احنا رابطة تيجا مالهم أنا هم بقول جاي سلازم سي ناس وقف ناس ذات عمدة في البحثي وقع بمسوقتي زغفل سلامي وقع بكوفي كاديسكات إيركا ترى دي حاجة زغفل كان سلام كل سلام سلازم فنسي من تايلان إحنا زي هذا سبب سلو فيت أجار زغفل سبب سلو زلوسي زجرني بقى برضي إخواني يوم تقول مالتي تقولنا دين بزحت علامات زلوا مالو زد حالة زد كان جنزب زلوا هاني عم جبها تعرفي مثال اليوم جاي بجنزب زبالو لو مالك إحنا دل بعين جنزب أي نرجعين حبتنا مالك والكل نخذ ما جالس بعين جنزب يكون المخذ تاي يعني بعين تخطي الوجان فتلون لنا هنا بإقراوي من قال حتى قصي إقراوي السوق أنت اللي راحوا سايد مثل بري تتلعب يقول إقراو زر كليا يعني حكي أنا سي إقراو سي جبنا أينو زبالة يكون سي أما كل صنع سلا زبالة سي سئلون من تشوف الناس يوم سايد وورنا كل يوم ما كيف أنا سلا دلها يركب قوي يركب برس قوي سوق الله بتوزع زحمة السبع وبوق زي ترى بقوم من السوق ده أصلا على السوشيال ميديا كلهم جزء خفيفهم جوا جزء عزلوسي جزء على صوت ذوني من الإسيان ورا رأسهم ناي السنة أمره وكنا كابسهم قتلوا من ناي ده تأمين هذه أنا يكلمني
مرحبا أدمرك ثانك يو بس كنكي تبغى مدلتي دمو كم هالو سي طيلو حديث اللوزيا نزل كوبو لا هو حد حلفت نبر مسبل سجلنا مصبرم نصندو سكتاي فكردو صندو نمت ترش على مو كهرم كأنتاي دفيت كبر على الوقت مو روها بأخره سميكان تفكر أفانتي
اللي أنا حسب تبين انت سلام الله تبارك ولكن بس هو لكن ما أخذ حسابي تبين قال لك أو كله يفكرني
هو عندهم
اوكي تنتي سلام جزانا الله خير إذا صندو وجهك بزين زارة ما بعمرها كل اللي تجرب يجوز صندو بالفعل كنجي جلس شوات مقيمات إلنا نقوله وإذا مقيمات بتصرفنا غيرهم دوست ولا كنجي تصندو أكو شو بحث الزبالة ردي أمم سلام زدلي أمم مقيمات زدلي مقيمات زدلي التقرار بقرب بشي دليل أن هناك سلام سلنا دليل ربحا سلا زي بنا مقيمات لكن ربحا ونسلا زي كونا ما اليوم نزقتات يوم ربحا سلا زي كونا تجب الوعص ربحو زي مقال مفاليتو تردي وسلام يبلالو ثم اللي تاتبين ما يتمع تلاي من بستي الشافر من الحجة عزيزة التي ينكس خاصوي كاتي ما السلام نك السلام زدلي نتكوينا زدلش بسلام يكا مسار بتاعته كله نكوينا زودو دارو مالتي بسلام نقد يركا كم زين كاساس كم زي سرح تقول فجينا زي أبرها قبل بسنة سرعات من اللي سوالو دحرا فيكم لكم مقامات تشوفوي فجي كومي لا لابنا كوينات نحرج من كوينو زي ما كوينات ولا حانت ربحا يبنا زي كوينات زهر ربحانا يكونون هاي قد سنان يلو كابزي تاشمي وطالو زي بتقرأ يكون هزبهم حرافهم فجي جماعة لا يمنقسي بنا يدقل لوقاتي لكن يوشتو تساقمات المخفتر ويبقى فمحنتي كارتا حاسيبو بزي كويناتي أنا قد شبه زي قوتيلو معانا لكي ما كويناتي تولانو فجي تسغي زلهم بزي أنا ربحانا يكونن فجي كوينات تقبل نحن كوين كمخيات كله وكالو معبنا تزبير راسي كوينات تقبل نحن كوين هذا أقل داسي نجر بوداي مريدي بوداي لالا ولدي اللي فرقالو ويكا تاندي بالمقرمتي كامريتشاي بيكا وحسنة كايلكا تقبل إذا سألزي بني يتكر على عامة جيري فجي نحن أبتي ميديا كل جزء ذهبنا أطرح دي كونا ستكرا بنا دو بوليتيك سنتاي مثلا لا أخرج ولا لا كان يتينا يتشملو بتاعي زبنيرو فكيري ناب الصومالي فكر يرو زب الصومال ودبلوماسي بتاشمون يرو فجيرو من حريك دم زميلاس يرو بدر يومتي أبد يوم بعاسي متحاسي من بحرنا في الصومال كيدو فجي أبزي مشتغل عامة زقايد زنابري نزق نقومتها هتقبر كل جزء نجارات ببرد راح يكون كان كتفوت خمسة تقبر رز جبارك عابرينها دبلوماسية أسرار حالي مستمكة هذه تادي لا ترى لا تخيل تينا مردا ما فاش نكردا عاسيلو سد ولا عن تقبر رز قليلا بس بين إسكاه هلا فينا تخيل سلسلة زوم بزبيطة زيو تيجي لو أم كوينات سيرتيوم عيدلنا يربحنا كالكونا نقول سو نحنا نتي كوينات نقبل يجبون زلوا بطن حزبتها غيرنا لما قد سلام نخيد لنا يجبون البعض شعبيات فريحة حزبيات لا تنجي بحر نحنا ما سلام جاكانو مرنا فينا جاكانو كنا بعلا مدلنا أبوت أنا نحرمتي مرجعات يبلا ስጋብ ዘይመፀግን ቦቶም ሙዚቃ ጌርካ ነተሓዉ ማይ ክምስምሰሉ ኣገዳሲ ኩናት ክምስምሱ ነዊሕ ምፅዒሮም ነዊሕ ምፅዒሮም በቲኖም እቲ ህዝቢ እውን ኣይሓገዞምን እሱ ምኳኑ ምስ ዓብዮም ኣብቶም ሚሊታት ናይ ትግራይ እውን ኢንቨስትመንት ገይሮም ነንሕዶም ኣታኺሶም ዕላሞም ከሳሲ ብዙሓን ፈቲኖም ንዝክር እንዳሕር ኮይና ከምኒ ናይ ፕሪቶርያ ምፍራሙ ናይ መንግስቲ ወታደራት ወይ ከዓ ናይ መንግስቲ ሳፍዶባት ናይ ኤርትራን ትግራይ ክሰፍር ኣለዎ ኢሎም ዝጭብሩ ዝነበሩ እሶም እዮም እቶም ወታደራት ናይ ትግራይ ግን ኣብዚ እንዳሕር ኣትዮም ኣብ ዘይተደልየ መገዲ ክንከይድ ስለ ንኽእል እዮም ሰባት እዚኦም ክኣትዉ ይክእሉ እዮም ኣብ መንጎ ስጋ ሕጂ ነቲ መገዲ ይኸድዎ ኣለዉ ስለዚ እሶም ሕጂ እውን ክኸዱ እዮም እቲ ህዝቢ ካ ተረዲቦም ናቲ ውሳነ ወሲዱ ኣሎ ህዝቢ ገርጊርካ ንገርጊርካ ናብ መሬትካ ምናልባት ምስ ማእከላይ መንግስቲ ናይ ጥርዋሽ ምትፍታን ክገብሩ ከሉ ብዝተፈላለየ መገዲ ግን ነዊሕ ዝኸይድ ኣይኮነን ካብ ምፍታን ግን ዘዕርፉ ይኮኑን ክብል ኢለ
Thank you, Avantai. Thank you. Roha, to the Ghana later first.
Oh, so.
Dan, حتى بيلي يخمل لساديا. سكفتا أيفترون دو. هو سكفتا لا فتيرو من بار. سكفتا خوينهم سي. انتاي جيرو مسلكا. وقعي تحت صغير مسرح وديهم سي أخيبا جيرو فبحج الدحار نحنا نفلطو من قستاب تقراي تي بريتوريا غير استسامة مع حيلينا نفلد كان حيلين نفلد من أسلزي يلا وطيهم تاب تقراي سوي وامم هذه ممكن يوم أديس أبا أديس أبا تقالوا وطلهم منبر وسيلهم حجي عقمنا هاي تقرأين بالدخام تواداديبهم بوشتي بجنزب وخون بخبابي أو نتخون بقلش رحنا دفترو نتا تقرأي كبتلوا يسعروا له سواء ترسم دو تساقم الله لا عبد تساقم بفساتهم لا أنت ترسم دو إنسان تسميدهم زلو بجي سبوغ نقولو تقرأي جزين زك كنز تزري قد سنحماي زك كندا بلا نقراتي خيد سلزلو تاينا خونا خيدا لو قم هاولو عركي لما يندا تقرر تحريت كان تحت مدور دخل أما جارشا حزب تقراي تحق أنيا مايكريو جميرو له حجي زرا يزولو لما جمرتا قداي فتحي قداي ديمقراسي كلمة اندا تباله مستي حلو في تاريخنا ويانا تقيقا كايدا بزح تقاومتات نعاهم كان بزح تقبالنا تقرخو بقيلهم نيرا بزح سبي مقاقيم نيرا أوش تقرأي تراي ديكونس أبدقون كي ترفع نتعامي نايتقارو الدينو مونيرا الجن تايكن زنقو عدي بلنا قجي في نيرو بدقا نايتقارو فلي أبدقا بتعمي حيال نيرو كنت زكروس الدبلوماسيا والمسرحة قلنا ناس مرة يمدو تصابونا نيرو نخل الديو مكساب قجي في دقا نيرو بزحنا مكساس مانيفر نايم قوار كالك نيرو توديبون بزحنا قرات قوار قول نيرو هذا غي ترفع بتاتي خومو جي أما جرشن تعرف إنها سيوريدو مصاتهم تلك تقرأي بذكرتها أبزت صمدو آتيان إيران تتخول أتنا كرم حيلة إذا نايت صمدو قعزو نايم حكا نويح قعزو تقو عايزو محلو عجي كابز زلوان لعل خيدو محل عجي كنت استبتنا تقرأي بوينا عامل تداخل مخينو ولا بديبلوماسيا أبلع لي حواحات انتي دي إفنسي تصادي غور الجمير دولو بدقة من هاي دقة حيلة وزنتا يرأيكا ساعتهم بسرعة زلوا صح كليل هيك أنصار كان أسرت زي أمريكا نتملى لسوا بزلوا ما بزلوا سبات ندخل كينات كايدو زليو لكن ما حد يعرفهم ساب ستيت ديبارتمنت زلوا سبات كالوت مجلتات زي عرفت ينصر زلوا بوجن تقرأيك جنرالات ولو معلوميات شو زركوا بس بلتقنا هاينا بزح سرح يصرحوا له صبونا قروجن لازم تقرأي كريم جميل رايج قدم عام يزدقفني نبرتين تلي وين يرهزم أو حتى بعد ولا بتنتبه لي دنيا كيدو نيري لازم تقرأي بتنتبه الحوار تايلو أخدق من خبز العلي نيري سؤالتنا ريفورم بحال ما ديمقراطية بحال لو كان البوليتيكال مسرحات متعرّي قال زولو أو كيدو وكان في اللين نسيت تستميدهم نيرو عجب نيرو مصون أي بحكي ما بدعونا عن نيرو ساتهم تقرأي تواتات يرو ما نيرو تزغن دروخم تعانتو يزور كوستي تودو شاشاليتن معتم زي عرفت دقوسو سولو زلو خوينات سي تحمقن تناي كوينات مدلاوا ستوديو محلوه قرفوتي ولا تعطيت هذا يتتكوسس يتمسرح سي اوريدي ابد فعناس افتفيت في تسمح لنا حكم سراويت ايتيوبيا ولا تي دي اف بالبالاو تتصنبيرو حين يخفد تبايلو اوريدي فاست خوينا ساعتنا محلنا تتكوسون محلو بجزي مقان تتبنى اوريدي تتيس تتكوس محلو يدبل يعود قاعد حتى نقفص
مسرح بتتوقع كنت حسنا عندي حاسيبه بدي فينا هو صعيد توقع السوق ناتو كالكوليشن ازم نتيصم نو كاشام شو كل اللي بزلو دناخو ابز السوشيال ميديا نالوقات نبزونا لوقات باي ذا واي يوم كدينا يوم كاينا مسا ابراهام بلاي تكس داتا بركا قبل أنا كنا صومينا قصينا خوتي رجع حبوا يقول لي كل علامة ناتهم دنبرة ناتهم دناخور مالتي دناخور سلوزغوني أسمعتهم دينو العلم بد سرحتني هذا مسكنا وخانم درو كدينا منا وعند أديس أبا عتيقة سرح من جمر كتبات منا أنا ثهاريتنا در حنامهم دنبرة دليتهم دنبرة نتبوتا النسوق وتشخلو سراويتو نعنا خينا قرنا يبايزو يوجه خب زلام بسان كبابي نخد فلطو من دا مالتي ولا زعجي مالتي زعجي وتشخلو خب زلام بسان قلبلا مشت أتصمو وابيلو هادي وجه تانكتاتون قلنا نحيزو مالي نيري أب زلام بسان نيري سراويتو زلام بسان نيرو بس صورنا نيرو بقول بطاطا نيرو من حتى على سراويت لأن هذا نبرنا موتا نيرو من أتصمو وابيلو خادم كله انتهي علامات وري أنا بزحون زاربولو سنة زين دلم بقى حسيبهم ما زنبورو بعد الزنا بعد كان بعد ጌታቸው ረዳ ጉጅለ ረሃሚጃ ነተሰራዊት ቋጥሮ ፈቲና ነይሮም ጌታቸው ረዳ ዝክሮ ተኸውኩም ሰለስተ ካብቶም ላዕሎት ሓለፍቲ ኣዝ ሰራዊት ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ሰጉይዎም ካብ ስልጣን ሰጉይዎም ኣለኹ ድመለሉ እዋን ዝክሮ እንዲኹም
ነቶም ምስኡ ኮይኖም ዘለዉ ኣህዱታት ገይሩ ከተሰና ሓሲቡ ነይሩ
ኤግዛክትሊ ነቶም ምስኡ ዝነበሩ ኣዘዝቲ ሰራዊት ንዖም ሒዙ ነቶም እምቢ ኣይንገብርን ኢና ዝበልዎ ንዓቶም ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ካብ መዝነትኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ኢልዎም ክገርመኩም ሽዑም ምሸት ንሳቶም ንፅባሒታ እዮም ምንቅስቃስ ገይሮም እቶም ካብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ዝበሎም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ሓዊሱ ምስ ኩሎም ታሕተወት ተኣዘዝቲ ናቶምን ኣህዱታቶም ከይተረፈ እያ ኣደስኪንዎም ንሳቶም ምትሓዝ ኣበይ መንበርቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ንዓቶም ኣብ ትሕቲ ቀይዲ ንኸትዎም እዮም ተንቀሳቐሶም ነይሮም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት እቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ነቶም ምስኦም ሕራይ ዝበሉ ከም በዓል ወደን ጥሩ ገለመለ ሒዝካ ነቲ ንፅባሒቱን ድሕሪ ፅባሒቱ ቀጥታ በዚ ንሓና ዶባት ውቅ ከፍቱ ይትመደብ ነይሩ ንክትፈልጥዎ ማለት እዩ ትዘይተነግሮ ኣነ ነዞም ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም ዝፍክሩ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ሰብካ ፈሊጥዎም እንዲ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ምዃኖም ክሕቡ ይክእሉን እዮም እዮም ከዓኒ ሰብካ ክከላኸለሎም ኣይክእልን ተሓቂ ንሱ ስለ ዝኾነ ደናቁር ስለ ዝኾኑ እምበር ሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ነቲ ሰራዊት ሒዝካ ናይ ትግራይ ማለት እዩ ያላ ከይደ እቶ ንዛላንበሳ ገፅካ ሓዛ ክበሃል እሞ ሽዑ ቶክቶክ ክጅምር ሽዑ ትፈደራልካ ረዳት ተባሂሉ መፂኡ ክዕወሶም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ምሸት ከባቢ ንሳቶም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ኣብ ዝገበረሉ ጌታቸው ረዳ እስማዕ ኣለኹም እዞ ሎማዓንቲ ክነግረኩም እየ ሓቂ ኣውተው እዩ ፀገም የብሉን ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ክገብር ከሎ ሰጎም ከሎ ፅሒፉ ካብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ክብሎም ከሎ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ ሰዓት 6-7 ኣቢሉ ኣነ ንባዕለይ ካብ ትግራይ ተደው ኢልኒ እሞኑ ይትእመኑ ማለት እዩ ሰብ ኣለዎ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ኣብ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ 7 መኻይን ዓበይቲ መኻይን 7 መኻይን ሰራዊት ኣራኪቡ በዚ ራያን ከባቢን ማለት እዩ ንምሸቱ ማለት እዩ ስለዘይንዛረበሉ ሰዓቱ ስለዘይኣኸለ ሲልና ምስ ፀጥታ ምስ ገለ ስለዝተሓሓዝ ኢና ዘይንዛረብ እምበር ተሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ፅቡቅ ጌርና ኢና ንፈልጡ በቲኦም ካብ ስልጣን ኣውርድ ኣቢሎም 7 ዝኾና መኻይን ኣውሪዶሞም ኣብ ግንባር ራያ ትብልዎ ከባቢ ማለት እዩ እቲኦም ክጅምሩ እሞ ቶክቶክ ከብሉ እቲኦም ካብ ሕቡስ ኢሎም ከኣትዎም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ማለት እዩ በዚ ቢልካ ነቲ ኩናት ብዓባዕቶ ክሎት ዕላማ ዝኒኦ ንሳቶም ዘይተፀበይዎ ግን እቲ ክከታተሎም ዝፀንሐ ሓይሊ ከዓኒ ንሳቶም ከይጀመሩ ከሎ ብዓዲ ግራት ክፀራርጎ ጀሚሩ ማለት እዩ ምናልባሽ ነቶም ሻዕብያ መን ምዃኑ ዘይፈልጡ ማለት ከነላልዮም ንሻዕብያ ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም መንግስትና ንፈልጥ ኢና ድብሉ ደናቁር ከነላልዮም ንሻዕብያ ማለት እዩ እና ከነላልዮም መንግስቲ ኤርትራ መን ምዃኑ ማለት እዩ ኣውዲቓትን ላምዥር ትድሕዝነኒ ኣውሪዳት እቲ ድሕዝነኒ ግን ናይዞም ደናቁር እልፊ ደንቆረራ ሓይ ክፍሊ ኮይኖም ክዛረቡ ከለዉ ዋላ ነቲ ድንቁርኖም ክሽፍኑ ዘይክእሉ ምዃኖም ይድሕዝነኒ ማለት እዩ እልፊ ደናቁር ናይ ካብ ፍልጠት ነፃ ዝኾኑ ሰባት ዓቕሞም ስለ ዘይፈልጡ እዩ ዓቕሞም እንተዝፈልጡ ነይሮም ኣፎም ሒዞም ስቕሞሩ ነይሮም ግን ልዕሊ ዓቕሞም እዩ እዚ ሕና ንዛረቦ ዘለና ኣይፈልጥዎን እዮም ንዝመፅእ ዘሎ 100 ዓመት ተመራሚሮም ኣይፈልጥዎን እዮም ግን
I think we got to consider the fact that the U.S. has done crazy stuff in the past, typhoid, smallpox, blankets, diseases, people. The list goes on and on. Like, we could talk about